Here we go. We are live and back to talk about comics, whatever else we're talking about tonight, which is how many subscriptions we have on YouTube that we could never watch.
It's a large number, folks.
I have a lot of ASMR videos that I have subscriptions to.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot. I have a few, not a lot, but I have a handful of true crime feeds. I'm really not a huge true crime guy, but I like storytelling. And some of them are good at storytelling kind of thing.
That's true, yeah. For me, crime's a weird thing. It just depends on what it is. I'm not a fan of anything. Well, I won't say I'm not a fan. I just don't have any interest on anything that has to do with either serial killers or organized crime.
Yeah,
organized drug cartels, that sort of thing. It just doesn't.
Organized crime, serial killers, no interest.
Although I have a bunch of friends of mine who watch every serial killer thing they can get their hands on.
Oh yeah, I've known people like that.
Sometimes it's like
I have no fascination with serial killers. No. He subs too many to watch.
Yeah, just like us.
Yeah, like I said, I barely sub too many because I was just telling Scott I probably like active
channels.
Sheldon and Howard, say hi to Raj when he gets in. We will. Good evening, my fine comic fiends. Good evening, boils and ghouls.
Well, if we were watching Foundation, that will make one of us would be Harry Sheldon.
I haven't gone back to Foundation since I watched an episode and a half of it. So
gotcha.
Haven't gone back. I've been I don't know if I showed these last week. What I've been obsessed with all this week making was my where am I?
Yeah, you showed some of those.
Right. I think I made about 10 of them last Friday. I have made 90 since then. I made 80 of them. I just somehow got so caught up in them. I don't know. It's and what it is I have a bunch of old Magic cards, Magic the Gathering game. And I've been taking a bunch of not a bunch, only 2 so far. This is Conan number 40. And I've been cutting out the art from Conan number 40 and pasting it down on random Magic cards. And for some reason, this has been fascinating me. Not only doing it, but actually looking at them, because it's kind of like...
Is it a Zen sort of thing?
Yeah, and it puts them in a whole new context. It's really weird because... that's just a random and I found out one thing Roy Thomas his wordiness is really good for is cutting out and putting on cards, because one thing I've noticed, like some of them have no, let me see if I can find one. There's one with no word balloons. Oops.
Right.
That's kind of cool, but for some reason I like it better with word balloons. It's funny because let's see, just came back from watching Earl Grey's second collection video. Love those kind of vids, especially coming from someone like him. The collection full of stuff I've never heard of. Oh yeah, I haven't watched that one yet.
Yeah, Earl Grey does fantastic videos.
He's got some good ones. I watch most of his. But like it's just, it makes me look at the card in a new way, and it makes me look at the art in a new way.
Have you ever thought about trying to match up the art that you're putting in there with the text on the card?
I have, but I do it sort of.
Okay.
I match it to whatever cards I get. You already found the time to do your paintings, videos, work. I just have such a creative drive that I constantly do work. That, and I'm not married and don't have kids. I mean, that's a lot of it right there. True. That really is a lot of it.
Yeah.
Part of the reason I'm not married and don't have kids is because I have a creative drive, but that's a whole other story.
If you had kids, you'd have a procreative drive.
Yes, exactly. But it's so funny. I was just because what it is too is, have you ever played Magic the Gathering?
I haven't, but I'm very familiar with it. My friend Hal, who's art director at Green Ronin Games,
Okay.
we went to college together, and we played Dungeons and Dragons, role playing games, things like that. And I remember when Magic first came out, he got a whole bunch of them, and he was begging people to play with him, and nobody was interested at that time. And of course, if we knew later on how much those early cards were, going to be valued, we probably would have bought up a whole lot of them. No, I haven't played it, but I'm familiar enough with it to get the gist.
But one thing about Matt, he still plays. I'm going to have to check that pirate platform called X Mage out. Let me write that down because I have never heard of that before.
The largest Magic card store, I think, in the world, if I'm not mistaken, is about 30 miles from here.
But especially in most of the modern Magic cards, really? Gee, that's pretty great. How long have you played? Yeah, okay. Especially among most of the modern Magic cards, the art is almost superfluous. In terms of, it's nice. Like, here's one I cut out. There's a nice. They're beautiful little illustrations, but in the beginning they were more sort of graphic, and now they're like really highly illustrative illustrations. But they're this big. They're 2 by 3 inches, so you can't really see what's going on in the illustration that well. And what makes Magic cards valuable and what makes them desired is what they can do. Their game mechanics, their playability. It doesn't matter if the illustration on it is good or bad, as long as the card does something good.
Right.
So it's kind of this weird thing. It's this weird thing where and the comics I've got like that I'm using to cut them up are just the sort of battered old comics that my LCS owner gave me.
Right.
So it's almost like those, and he gave them to me because I was like, because I sometimes do drawings on comics. I tear a sheet out of an old comic and do a drawing on it.
Right.
But I don't do that many of them that I need 20 comics. So I started doing this with them. And it's kind of like the comics are almost super. And they're like, one I started doing stuff with this week was Star Wars number 12. I had a battered old copy of Star Wars number 12 that I started cutting up. Like, here's a random dragon head from who knew there were dragons in Star Wars. And it's like I have no interest. And it's like I have no interest in Conan number 40 is a pretty mediocre issue of Conan.
Oh, if you asked me what happened in an individual issue of Conan, I would have no idea.
I can't even remember. I'm looking at the art and can't remember who drew it. It was like a fill-in. It wasn't like John Buscema or Barry Windsor Smith or Neil Adams or anyone like that. 39, I think, was Neil Adams. 49.
Yeah, if you're cutting up Barry Windsor Smith Conans, let me know. I'll take them off your hands.
But so it's like I'm taking these sort of comics I have no interest in the cards, which I like. I haven't actually played Magic the Gathering in a long time,
right?
But I still like the cards. I still like the game. I still like taking the cards out and looking at them to kind of see what they can do, kind of thing. Because and it's also that I bought this particular. Like comics, most Magic the Gathering cards are worthless.
The majority of them, yeah.
Yeah. So I went on you can go on eBay or Amazon and for $25 order a random 1,000 cards.
Right.
That's what I did. So now I got 1,000 cards that are worth a penny a piece, right? So I'm taking these sort of random Magic, worthless random Magic the Gathering cards, these kind of worthless comics. And the comics I don't even have an interest in, sort of as I don't want to read Conan number 40. I don't want to read Star Wars number 12. But when I put them in this new context of there's a little R2-D2 tweeting at something with half a word balloon. When I put them in this new context, all of a sudden I'm fascinated with them. Because all of a sudden it's like I'm interested in usually I'm not interested in the art and the cards.
Right.
There are some artists that I follow. Like there's one I follow on Facebook. He's a comics artist. Is Ken Meyer Jr. And he's heavy into making cards and even custom cards for Magic the Gathering. He goes to conventions just dedicated to that. So he's pretty heavy into it.
Yeah,
Folio that did Girl Genius. Are you familiar with him?
No.
He did trying to think, what did he do that you would be familiar with? I'm not sure if you'd be familiar with anything he did. Terrence would, because he has a certain taste in comics. He did an adult comic that was called Xenophile, which was really funny.
Okay, I vaguely remember that title.
And he used to, there's a couple other things now that I'm remembering. He used to do a comic strip in Dragon magazine. It's called Phil and Dixie, which was about Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay, I have seen that.
The things you would probably know him for, which escaped me at first, were Buck Godot.
Don't know that.
He was like an overweight version of Buck Rogers. But more on the detective slant than the hero slant. But it was a science fiction. That's probably the mainstream things that most people know him for. But he did a lot of Magic the Gathering cards, and him and his wife both do that.
So mind the comics. You can send me some deck lists to play online, because all my deck recipes are from the 90s. They're a little out of date.
Well, what you can do now is you can get a font that matches the font on the cards.
Oh yeah.
Put that in Photoshop and then create your own text.
Oh, I have done that. I have actually. I used up until this summer. I used to make my own altered art cards that I sold on eBay, which I kind of stopped doing this summer for just because I ran out. But I was doing it for like 5 years. I'd strip the art off a Magic card using acetone, and I'd prepare the ground and use my printer to print it new art on top, and then varnish the top of it and make it into a new card.
Bootleg cards.
But that actually takes a lot of physical labor. Making one of these, and it was funny. Another thing I was contemplating was these were feeling nostalgic for me, because I was making these using all my old hand paste up skills. Got hockey cards that aren't worth much at all. Yeah. While in college, with a couple of friends, took time to that Marvel cards, and
yeah, I used to collect basketball cards, and one year Topps came out with them where they were perforated into thirds.
Mm-hmm.
So I had one, I wish I still had it in intact position. Of course, you perforate it into thirds, you tear it up into thirds. Right. Had Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, and Dr. J on it, and that card's worth a lot of money now.
Yep. Because a lot of people tore it into thirds.
Kick myself for not keeping that. So.
But it's funny, like I look at the cards, and now it makes me look at the art, and I've never looked at Carmen Infantino art so closely as I do on one of these cards.
That was really my first exposure to Carmen Infantino's art, those early Star Wars comics.
I was not a fan of this.
I read those long before I read, The Flash or any of the well-known stuff he's most known for.
And it's like I look at the art and I'm like, wow, it's
not.
Even though I'm not interested in the actual, I'm just not interested in reading Star Wars number 12. I know I won't like it. Still, looking at bits of panels from it makes me wonder what the story was. And it's kind of like I create my own story in my head. That's
kind of like color. It's kind of like color forms, if you remember those.
Yeah. It's like I create my own story in my head that's probably more interesting to me than the actual story.
One thing I thought was weird, too, is that my first exposure to that Infantino art in Star Wars, his art style that he used at that point in his career was really different than his earlier style.
Right.
It was a lot more sharp edges to it.
Oh, yeah. He extended, he strung stuff out a lot. But like panels like this, which this comes from a Star Wars book. And this guy looks like a French painter. He's got a beret on.
Yeah.
And he's saying, what is he saying? He can't swing it every way at once. Come at him from all sides, fast, from all sides. And it's just like some random balloon that You don't know what it means in the larger context of the story. It's just, I don't know. I've just been finding, like I said, I made 90 of them. So for some reason, I've just been fascinated by the process. Like the process is sort of nostalgic for me, and also got me thinking along the paths of, because I was using all my old hand paste up skills and tools. Stuff that I used to do at Marvel before the desktop publishing came along.
Yeah,
So it's like I was using, my X-Acto knife, which I've had since I was a freshman at college.
Right.
I was using my tweezers, which come from my Marvel days. I still have these. I used to use these in Marvel before the desktop publishing. I have a metal ruler, which is the same. I took it from Marvel and during our desktop. So it's like the same. I'm using the same tools I was using in like 1991. Even probably never heard of this stuff because no one has. It's Scotch
position marker,
position mounting adhesive, and what this is it's a roll. It's got plastic paper with sticky stuff on it. So this is what you use for pasting up certain things. What I do is I take the piece of the comics page and put it on this, and you rub on the back side with a same burnisher I was using in Marvel, the same exact one, and it transfers the sticky stuff to the paper, and that's what keeps it down. And I was even thinking to myself, it's just basic stuff. It's just pasting paper onto more paper. But I was like, you know what? I wonder how many people in the world would even think to do this and could think to do this.
I had a journalism class in high school, and we would take literal, paper, you cut out the article, what have you, the text. You would actually post it down to a sheet that was like a gridded blue line sheet where, the grid didn't show up when it was reproduced. And tiny little dots of like rubber adhesive to hold it down in place, and you'd have to line it up and get it level.
That's what paste up was.
Yeah,
those are the same skills I was essentially doing.
It's a very painstaking process to get things right, and if you don't, it looks horrible.
Right, and also it's like I don't even think you could make these with regular glue. To do it with rubber cement would be messy and kind of difficult. You couldn't use like an Elmer's glue or a glue.
It's going to interact with the paper that the artist put it on too.
This is kind of the perfect stuff to do it, but this stuff isn't. Nobody knows. If I didn't work in Marvel, I'd never know this stuff existed. I'm like the only one I know who uses this stuff at all.
Yeah,
it's like no one else does. And then
if you took a survey of some older comics artists, you'd find all kinds of stuff like that.
And it's like here's what I did. I cut a hole out of a magic card so I could, line it up in there. And then I'd take the X-Acto knife and cut right along the edge. And another paste up skill you have to know when you make these is you always want to cut with like the edge in the same place. So don't cut it like that. You got to cut it along the top, then move the paper, cut it along the top, then move the paper and cut it along. And it's like, that's just one of those like little paste up things that probably if you've never done it, you don't know. Because what happens when you do it like that is your hand is moving in 4 different directions.
Right.
And you mess up. And I've messed it up before when I forgot to do that. I've messed up and gone. But it hasn't like not only is it kind of nostalgic using all the old tools. It's nostalgic, looking at the old cards. And it's like this. I just got caught up in this weird headspace where I just found it fascinating, and I kept making them.
Gotcha.
Yesterday, quite a bit. Do you think there's a market for hand paste up old school crafted comics with pre-digital inking and whatnot? One of the big two. No.
No.
I
think once you put that quantifier in there that says big 2, that kind of negates.
Yeah. I don't think there's many people who care how the comics are made. They just care how they come out.
if you did something like that at SPX, for example, it'd be a whole different story.
I must be the only one. Yeah, it's like you could. There's that if you sort of want to make old nostalgic comics, there's a small market for that. There is. There always has been.
Yeah.
But would it be a big thing? Yeah, that's just the way
if you, like I said, if you did a small press expo, that would be a whole different ball of wax. But when you put big two, nah. Oh, yeah, Terrence has joined us in the Usagi Yojimbo fan club now.
Oh, he has. I think I saw him.
He got the first trade.
Oh, that's good. That's good. It's great stuff. It is. Now I have to figure out what I'm going to do. I'm still threatening to start a Patreon, which I might get going this weekend finally, since I have enough stuff. I might like give these away on Patreon or something, because there's nothing really. I don't know that there's anything to be done with them besides giving them away, because I don't know. Like I said, my other altered art. There's Paolo. My other altered art cards that I took a lot more work that I made on. Like only a small percentage of them were people interested in. So.
You could always do the time-honored thing of try putting it on eBay and see who has it.
Yeah, I know that's. I just don't think many people will. We're talking about Paolo. I made even more of these. Also, I gave them a name finally. They're called paste-up mashups. I was caught up this week in making a ton of these, taking Magic the Gathering cards and old comic books and pasting the panels in where the art is. And I cut up like a whole bunch of Conan number 40 and Star Wars number 12, two battered old comics I had. And I was just finding it fascinating to look through them. It's the old, you take two things and mash them up, and now they're in a new context. And I'm just like, wow, I found it much more interesting.
If you do that with a bunch of Russ Eath war comics, we can put them up in the galleries and somebody will pay $5 million for them.
There you go. I'm thinking of that. Don't think that didn't cross my mind.
You should print out that jungle comic we looked at a few months ago and cut it up.
Yeah, we can call it the leopard exhibit.
Random C3PO with a word balloon. It's just like, I don't know. I'm just sitting here reading them like, since there doesn't seem to be any land, that's all it says. And then a half a balloon over there. It's crazy. I think yesterday I was making them all day, just because. Just because. And it's like, now I got to figure out, like I said, what I made 90 of them. Now I'm like, now what do I do? I got 90 of these things. I was thinking about the only thing I could sell, I think, on eBay or something is if I make a full deck of them, like match sort of a one comic to like a standard Magic the Gathering deck. I think people would be interested in that, but I don't know if people would be interested in one random Blood Rage vampire card with Conan on it. I just don't know. And as I know, having to stumble onto one or two in my day, it's just with like random. I mean, I find it fascinating, but I have discovered in life that most people aren't interested in the same stuff I'm interested in.
Oh, I knew that at a very early age.
Yeah. Well, we can try doing if you can sell it, we can try doing that with 90s Image comics.
Yeah, I could do with any worthless comics stick on there. Mm-hmm. Like I bought random Magic. You like comics, most Magic the Gathering cards are worthless. So you can buy, I bought 1,000 random Magic cards for $25 shipped. I should get some of the old foil packs and reels. Yeah, that kind of would be interesting. I actually just bought two. I make I sometimes make trading cards. Here are a bunch of my own artwork. And I make them of various, and I laminate them. So I print them on my inkjet printer, both sides, and I laminate them. But I actually, let me see if there's one here. I stopped doing it because, here's one. I actually like to round the corners. And the way you round the corners is with one of these.
You got a clipping tool?
Yeah, it's a corner rounder.
Yeah.
It's like a craft tool. I've had about half a dozen of these over the years. The problem is they're not really made for laminated paper.
Once I find it, I can send you a link to a specialty tool that's used just for that.
I just found one on the internet, and it's like a big handle.
Yeah,
I'd never seen one before.
Yeah, in the wargaming community, they make what are called counters, which are little square chits that pop out for individual units and stuff. And there's actually I won't say a cult, but there's almost like a cult-like subgroup of fans who just specialize in rounding those corners on the counters, which is very. You think comics fans are minute, picky about stuff.
They actually
have specialized tools that have different radiuses that you can use.
These have different radiuses too. But I actually stumbled onto them about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
But a lot of their corner rounders weren't much different than this. The one I happened to stumble onto this week was like $125 for this big hand manual corner rounder.
Yeah.
These run about $20. Like I said, I've probably bought 6 of these over there.
Terrence knows exactly what I'm talking about in the comments there.
Yeah, got the Oregon counter. But anyway, I found this one. I love the rounded corners. Exactly. It's a big thing when you sell the war game. You have to have specifically if the corners are clipped or not. Okay. Well, this one I found runs about $120, but I found a used one on eBay for about $40.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Oh, cool!" And so I actually ordered it, and it will be coming on Monday, so I can make my round corners again for cards. But yeah, these ones. First of all, I had to use a lever on them, so I had to get a piece to get through the lamination. So I had to get a piece of wood and use that as a lever, and then it dulls so quickly.
Yeah.
I got a jar with all the corners I've clipped saved for some reason.
You can get a top loader for the card and then make a little symbol like the CGC symbol and tell people it's slabbed. It's 9.8.
But I can't wait to be able to round corners. As a matter of fact, I could probably just throw this right in the garbage. And it's Fiskar, too. That's a good brand.
I have some Fiskar scissors.
Yeah.
I never thought anybody outside the wargaming community would be interested in rounding corners on anything. What a small world we live in. Wow.
So those few of us who like to make their own trading cards, I use them as business cards sometimes. If somebody asks me about my work, I hand them a trading card.
Mm-hmm.
They always go, "Oh."
Makes sense.
You're the only one besides my grandfather when I was a kid that had those crazy rulers that measures out ruled spaces with tapping. I've been trying to find one for. Oh yeah, well those I've showed those. That's I've been looking for another one. That's this right here. It's a HAFF. It's German. Parallel rule maker. I think it was used when hand drafting was a thing.
Yeah, you see those a lot of drafting tables.
Yeah, right. No, this isn't the one you see in graphic. You see on drafting tables isn't like this. That's more like a parallel rule, right. And that's more like a parallel rule and triangle.
But I've seen smaller ones like that you can use like that.
Okay,
localized.
Because what this is it's got a little dial right here that goes from 0 to 5 millimeters, I think it is. Yeah. So it's half a centimeter. And you just dial it, and then every time you hit this little thumb button, it moves down exactly that much. That's so it makes it easy to make parallel lines,
right? Which
is what I use on my big ink drawings. But it's funny because this I think is 10 inches, right? 10, just short. It looks like 9.5 inches. But I bought this in like the early '90s. When hand drafting was still a thing.
Mhm.
And there was one that's this length, and there was one that was like 15 inches. And I always like to buy art supplies, and I'm one of those people who likes to try out new art supplies. So I was like, that looks pretty cool. I'll try it out. But this cost like $100 or something, and the 15-inch one was like 150. So I'm like, you know what? I'll get the smaller one because who knows if I'll ever use it. Well, it turned out, 40 years later, I'm using it all the time still, and I wish I had the longer one. I wish I had bought the longer one, because this also, like a comic book page of original art, is 10 inches across. This is 9.5 inches. How freaking annoying is that? That I can't I can't make a line all the way across a page of original comic book art. I'm half an inch. So if I want to make like parallel lines all the way across, I can't quite do it. So it's like, but actually what I did recently I don't know why it took me 30 years to think of this idea, but where is it? Well, I don't know where it went, but I took a plastic 15-inch ruler and cut it so it could fit in here. So now when I'm working on my big ink drawings and I need a long one, I swap this one out for the one I made out of one of these. It's not quite as sturdy, but it worked. But this must be the thing you're talking about. Tit Goblin. There's a good name for you. His grandfather had one? Yeah, you can't find these anymore. I have looked for them on the internet, and they just don't exist.
On camera from a certain angle, that looks like a bong.
From a certain angle, everything looks like a bong. So.
But yeah, because mine is starting to like the thumb piece comes right off now because the plastic is broken.
Yeah.
And sometimes it skips and I have to like take it apart and like wash the metal piece and try to get it to. Sometimes I don't even know what I do to get it to work again.
Yeah, we used to have a really, really good art supply store here because the college, and especially the architecture and engineering colleges, would have a lot of, drafting and things like that going on. And that store was great, but it closed about 3 years ago. I wish it was still open. They had all kinds of stuff.
Live dangerously, freehand those straight lines. I do that a lot too. That and those crazy hand texting machines, old car, are impossible to find. Ed Pushko's the only one I know of that is one of those text.
Oh, he's talking about one of those letter guides that they would use in the EC comics.
The what is it called? Oh, the name just flew out of my head.
Yeah,
it's a person's name for the machine.
It is. I'm going to have to look that up because that's going to drive me.
Yeah, because it's the EC it flew right out of my head. Because you're right, EC Comics knew him. It was a machine that you made the letters with. But man, like I said, I have searched for years for another one of those.
It's the Ames lettering guide.
No, Leroy lettering. The Ames lettering guide is the small plastic.
Okay, yeah, I'd say it's got the Leroy one too.
The Leroy lettering thing actually has letters that you kind of make with a plastic stencil sort of thing. I think is how it works.
Found a website all about that guy. Wow, I didn't realize it was that.
Oh yeah, it's that famous. And that's why EC Comics had the lettering done before it was penciled. So like the penciler would, or the artist, sometimes the penciler, a lot of times at EC they're the same guy.
Right.
Would get the art with all the lettering on it. Which is why Bernie Krigstein was so frustrated. Yeah, I have the Ames guide too. There's that the Ames guide is the one that was used for lettering for lots and lots of years. But instead of using an Ames guide, I used that parallel rule maker because it does the same thing. It makes all the Ames guide does is Well, you need a T-square and an Ames guide, and it makes parallel lines. You draw parallel lines with it.
Right.
And that was actually even easier than the Ames guide for that. If only I had the one that went all the way across.
You said earlier that what was the width of it again? Was it 10 inches?
Yeah, the width in general, original comic book art, 1.5 times up is 10 by 15.
So you're talking about the actual image size, not the paper size, right?
Yeah, the paper size is 11 by 17.
Okay, because
the image size is
you
10
just
by
trim
15.
paper down on each side, but yeah, it's image size.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's 11 by 17 paper, 10 by 15 image.
You remember
Like
those?
I said, and I would use that to draw my lettering guides across, but I couldn't go all the way. I'd have to draw the left-hand side lettering guides. And
I
then
don't
the
remember the
right-hand.
name of them, but do you remember those complicated devices that would extend out like a scissors kind of thing that you could use to make drawings bigger?
A pantograph.
Yeah,
Is that
pantograph.
what those are
Exactly.
called?
That's what you need for your ruler.
Yeah.
You need a pantographic ruler.
Panographic ruler. I've never used a pantograph, but I've tried to on
Grade
occasion,
school.
and they were so clumsy.
Yeah, one of our teachers in grade school had one. It was like a gimmicky, it was fun to use.
Yeah.
It really didn't amount to a whole lot.
Because you had to have your paper the exact right distance apart from the thing you were drawing. And I imagine it was real shaky too.
Yeah, and plus none of us were any great artists back then either, so the end result didn't look that great.
I always wanted to try that mirror one they have too. There's one that you have like a mirror coming up sideways, and you put a little picture over there, and then you have your paper over here, and it projects a picture onto. Supposedly, the Renaissance masters use that one too.
I know there's a lot of tricks. Mike Kaluta was talking about using not only a mirror, but reversing the paper and flipping and looking at it, through, backwards to see what
mistakes you made.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
That's an old trick. You flip it upside down to see, because sometimes you can't see the mistakes in your drawing.
Right.
Yeah, I miss all those old arts. Like I
art store downtown was fantastic. I wish it was still open.
Yeah, I got that piece in some random art store in Manhattan. I don't even remember where. Because there used to be a bunch of art stores in Manhattan. There still are some, but not as many as there used to be. There's a Dick Blick in Manhattan. That's probably the most expensive art store around. It is.
And it was the best example of a letter B being very important.
Yeah, I imagine you'd have to go, to an art store in Tokyo or Berlin maybe to get a more expensive art store.
Have you ever been to a website that's called jetpens.com?
Oh, yeah, I use that all the time.
Yeah, they import a lot of Japanese.
Japanese are crazy about their office supplies. So there's a lot of...
And you will not take my Uniball, what is it, the Kuratoga mechanical pencil? You're not going to put that in my dead hands. I love that thing.
I was looking for, I just posted on Instagram. If you look down there, I ended up signing and putting what comic it came from on the bottom. Gotcha. So I was looking for what pen writes. I was trying out all my pens. Where's on a card to see which one writes best on a Magic the Gathering card.
Would a rapidograph write on those?
It would, but most of my art pens, the ink was too wet for. And took a long time to dry, and sometimes little bits didn't dry. So it turned out that a Sharpie Ultrafine was the best for writing. It wrote on it fine. It dried instantly. And I was looking for a black one. So, of course, I bought an entire set of 24 colors of these Sharpies. It was like, I only needed one black one.
Yeah.
But I bought like 24 color set. I was like, I couldn't help myself. So now I have to figure out what I'm going to do with the other 23 cards.
Would a number one pencil do it before you laminate?
Huh? A number one pencil?
Number one pencil. Yeah, you write. No.
What was that? A number 1 pencil?
Yeah, you write on the card with the number 1 pencil and then you laminate.
I don't know what you mean by a number 1 pencil, but I don't think these cards are too slick for any pencil to write on.
Oh, yeah. The number 1, the number 1 is the one with the darker.
Okay.
You could use a grease pencil, but I don't.
Those are 6B. Yeah. Here. This is a. I'll try it right now. This is the soft. Usually 6B. The way we do pencils over here, or at least art pencils, there are H's and B's. Oh, this one writes okay. Where's one I haven't destroyed? This actually writes better than I thought. You're right.
Yeah, there you go. Listen to power.
It's not quite as dark as the. I never even thought of a pencil because the surface is so slick. But yeah, a soft pencil will write on Magic cards.
Nice. I was thinking of a hard pencil, but if the soft, right, but the hard pencil will probably damage it.
Yeah, let's try a hard pencil.
Jared, have you joined the Blackwing pencil cult yet?
No. I think I've heard of that. They're like writing pencils, though.
Yeah, they are, but they're like evidently the people that use them swear by that and nothing else.
Yeah. I like a really soft pencil. This is a 6. The softest a pencil usually can get is called a 6B. The H's are hard and the B's are soft. And like a 1. What's weird is the 1s are kind of in the middle. So like a 6H is really hard. Then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 gets softer. Then a 1B is the softest B, is the hardest B. Then 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the. So it's like
it's a weird.
6H is the hardest and 6B is the softest.
Whoever came up with that scale, somebody should just hit him in the head. Yeah. Logically, it doesn't make a lot.
I don't know. That's just the way it is.
It's like the scale starts in the middle and then goes both ways. You know. It's like,
yeah, it is.
What is that? You know.
No, what's also interesting about making these cards too is like I said, I use this to put over panels to find a good composition to use, and then I cut it out within here. But one thing I was kind of worried about when I was first doing it is something like this one. You know, there's newsprint on the left and right. It doesn't fill the whole art area with art. I was like, is that going to be too much negative space on either side? I don't know how this is going to work compositionally. But the sort of newsprint has its own presence. And sort of the newsprint in and of itself is interesting looking so it's like now I'm like, you know what? I'm finding compositions with some sort of newsprint.
Yeah, so you're using that as a framing device, kind of like Alphonse Mucha did.
Right.
Except it's not
a double framing device.
Yeah.
So I was like, that was one of the weird worries I had as I was cutting these out. But I was like, wow, the newsprint has such a presence itself. Oh, there's another one with on either side has a little newsprint on it, which, like I said, works fine.
You wouldn't want to cut them up, but if you could find some cheap copies of Steranko reprints.
Oh yeah,
those would make for some interesting looking cards.
I might have one of those now that you say it. There might be one in the pile. I know I have some battered old Steranko reprint somewhere. Yeah, it's kind of been.
What other artists would look funky on a card?
And you know what's really interesting too? You don't realize how thin this 70s newsprint is till you start working with it sort of like as a craft.
It's pretty thin, yeah.
It is thinner than you think. Because reading a comic, you don't really, you know it's thin and light, but you don't really notice how thin. Put like adhesive on the back and then have to move it. A few of them got ruined just because the adhesive stuck to my finger and I pulled it a little bit and it just tore that's why I started using exclusively, which are now glued together, I have to clean them off, the tweezers. So I I'd grab it like this and move it into place just by the little edge. So, and then get the little corner in place and press it down and make sure it was level, and then pull the tweezers out. Because if I was using my finger for that, and sometimes I couldn't pull my finger off. It was glued. And I'd pull it and rip the very thin newsprint right in half. It took some doing. Yeah, the cover was thicker, so you didn't really notice the thin interior pages. Yeah, nowadays you notice the thin, like
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
$8 tracing paper this week. Should have stayed with the $1 kitchen party paper. If you want to try tracing paper, get Vellum rather than tracing paper. Vellum is a thicker tracing paper and it works real nicely. Yes. Most companies now doing so. Matter of fact, I wanted to mention one comic I got this week. What was it? I think it was one I pulled off the shelf or one I... Oh, this was it. Dead Box, issue number 2. I put this one on my pull list. First of all, I liked the comic. This was what was it? This is that weird story that's like half Twilight Zone and half Outer Limits. I don't know what you'd call it. Because it takes place in this little town that's halfway to nowhere, and it's got nowhere on the other side of it too. And they don't even have the internet. The only movies they have is this red box thing with the weirdest movies you've ever seen on it. So half the story is about the strange people and the people living in this town. And the other half of the story is some random movie from Dead Box. So there's like parallel stories going on. What was this Dead Box story? It had to do with monkeys winning prizes. And it was like the story was this romantic comedy about a man and a wife competing at their local university. They both worked at the local university for a grant that involved behavioral experiments on monkeys. And it was just weird. And of course, there's, echoes of those behavioral experiments going on in this town. So it's really, I'm enjoying it. Really strange, different comic. But the reason it came up to mind right now is it's thin. And it's wall-to-wall comic in that you get 24 pages of comic, but it's only 24 pages. A lot of 24 comics with 24 pages of art in it are actually 32 pages of comics where they put ads and stuff.
Right.
And I don't know how expensive Vellum is right now. It's not really. I mean, you could probably get a Vellum pad for $20.
Yeah, it's not. From what I remember, it's not dirt cheap, but it's not really expensive either.
It's more expensive than tracing paper, but it's not that. All my Vellum is from the 90s. I barely ever use it anymore. If you were around here, I'd give you some of it.
Vintage Vellum.
Vintage, still in good shape, but it's from the 90s.
Yeah,
I used to use Vellum in my pre-digital days. When I once had a very thin comic. That was my point here. There's still a lot of thin comics today. My Drawing 1 teacher, my freshman year, had this whole little talk he used to give on how tracing paper is God. Some people worship this God. Some people worship that God. He worships tracing paper. Because when you're doing a drawing, rather than doing the drawing all over again, you throw a piece of tracing paper over it and you work it out. And that's actually how I used to do comics pre-digitally in the 90s, where I did all my initial penciling on tracing paper. So I'd do tracing paper, and then I'd just like light box that tracing paper onto actual Bristol, where I can move it around and change the composition and do this. The only thing I couldn't do was blow it up and down. Once the digital age happened, I did that all digitally. I can move things, and then I'd print it out in Blue Line. I was printing stuff out in Blue Line in like 1995, long before everybody else was, because I knew how to do it. But yeah, I've got a lot of old drawings on vellum and tracing paper.
Do you still have Letraset and Zipatone?
I have some of it. I never used it much, but I have scans of a lot of it. Like Bob Wyachek would come over and have me scan in all his old Zipatone sheets.
Gotcha.
So he could use it digitally now and then. So I've got a collection of it, and you can also make Photoshop Zipatones.
Sure.
You can like have Photoshop create a pattern to make Zipatones. So there's all sorts of things you can do that way. But Zipatone was expensive, so I didn't have a lot of it.
I remember one of my friends from college had he was an art major. He had some art classes, and they'd have all kinds of Zipatone. They would use that stuff all the time.
Mm-hmm. But it's weird to see a 24-page comic. There's not a lot of them. Invincible was a 24-page comic. Like I said, most comics are 32 pages, even if they only have 20 pages of new stuff in them.
I remember.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember seeing 24 pages comics in previews, and 24 was the standard size for UK weekly comics.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like I said, most are 30. Though, even like I said, you only get 20 to 24 pages of actual comic. Mm-hmm. It's still a 32-page package with the ads and stuff. And Vellum is thicker. Yeah. Vellum is probably twice as thick as tracing paper. Let's say it's much more durable. Let me see if I got a piece right here. I bet I do. Bristol Swiss tracing.
He's on the highway to Vellum.
There's so much paper. Where's my Vellum? Oh, it's all the way down the bottom. 1 second, folks. Of course it's all the way down the bottom. I never use it.
The thing is, a lot of this stuff is now useless because we have digital effects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Especially Zipatone.
Well, that's not what we were talking about earlier. I mean, you can make Zipatone, Letraset letters and things like that. Mm-hmm. Photoshop easily. I do see artists on occasion, especially on Facebook, always lamenting the fact that if one of their favorite art supplies ever runs out, they're going to be stuck or not know what to do. Like certain types of pens and papers and inks and whatnot. You know, a lot of them will buy up what they hope is a lifetime supply of it in case they ever run out.
There's a piece of tracing paper. It's like tissue almost.
Mm-hmm. And the last time I used tracing paper was what, 1996?
Yeah, I still use it on a kid. There's a piece of vellum. I'd say it's about twice as thick. Here's a little sheet. As you see, it doesn't.
Yeah, I was thinking vellum's more like the consistency of wax paper.
Probably without the waxiness. You can see the tracing paper crinkles up easily. Vellum does not. It's still, of course, thin enough to see through. Here, let's put it.
Vellum was originally made from sheepskin, wasn't it?
Originally, it was made from skin. That's where the name comes from. The paper that was for whatever animal skin it was. But you can still see through it. This is what lettering was done on when you pasted stuff up. The lettering was always done on vellum. They'd put this right over a photocopy of the pencils, and they'd letter right on the vellum. So,
when I had my, fortunately I don't have it anymore, but when I had my Sandman original page, it was interesting because it's Todd Klein's overlay for Morpheus' Speech Bloom was white ink on a black background. It was posted over the speech bubble. And it was interesting just to look at it to see how thick that was compared to the rest of the paper.
My 3-hole punch from like 1955 just fell on the floor. Look at that thing.
I used to have one of those. I don't have it anymore.
I still have one. Yeah. It fell on the floor. Now I've got a whole bunch of little holes on the floor.
Those things go everywhere, man.
Yeah. Like I said, I love all sorts of art supplies and stuff like that.
Yeah, those things work on a quantum level to find whatever nooks and crannies don't have anything else. They migrate directly for those.
It's probably at the kids' game. You might pop in later. We'll have to see. When I was a kid, newspaper greatest for zip tone. I still use that Morgue file, what's left of it, for art pieces. Ah.
Wouldn't it be interesting to find an artist Morgue file like an estate sale? Just to see what they had collected over the years?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, I'll have to find it. I have a piece of paper. Once again, back when I was a freshman in school, they gave us a paper on how to create a Morgue file, your reference file,
Right.
all the different categories and stuff. And I think I just got rid of mine that I haven't looked at I still have the binders up there. But I got rid of the stuff in the binders because I haven't looked at it. I threw them in the recycling. I have like women's clothes, men's clothes, women's etc. But it's all from like 1997 now because I haven't looked at it in that long.
True.
So it's not exactly the most current stuff. But I used to buy fashion magazines to tear out the outfits and put in my morgue, my reference files. Did that all through the early until the computer age, and now you just Google stuff or DuckDuckGo it, as the case may be. That's harder to say.
It's true.
Here's another comic I got this week. The Me You Love in the Dark, issue number 3. I'm really enjoying the artwork in this. I have no idea where this story is going.
So it's still not a porn comic.
It is not a porn comic, but it might be at the end here because Jorge Corona is an Eisner Award nominated Russ Manning Award-winning sequential artist, writer, and illustrator. He is best known for his work on We Are Robin, Nightwing, and The Flash for DC Comics, and Big Trouble in Little China Adventure Time Comics, Jim Henson's storyteller for Boom Studios. In addition to work from Middle West, Jorge created Goners and Number One with a Bullet. I'm really enjoying his art. This is the first time seeing his artwork. But the story is kind of nuts. I don't know. So far, it's about this young woman artist who's working on her show. So she moved in to this haunted house. So now she's got this friend she's got the friend who she's now a ghost who she's now made friends with. So this whole issue was about her and the ghost kind of hanging out, watching movies, her doing her work. And we don't even know if it's a ghost. It's just something. The ghost is kind of like, I don't know if I'm really a ghost. And then at the end, the relationship gets kind of romantic, even though you could see it was heading there this whole issue. And it was like, what? The artwork and storytelling are nice. It made me look up a movie because the movie that she and the ghost are watching over and over again is one called About Time that I had never heard of, from about 10 years ago, about a kid who can stop and rerun time. For some reason, it runs in his family, and it's like a romantic comedy. So that was the movie they were watching that made me go look up what it is and maybe watch it. But enjoying this series, no idea where it's going. Can barely describe it. Besides a romance comic between a woman and a ghost. I keep expecting it to take a dark turn, but it hasn't so far. And they gave us like preview of a couple of pages from next issue, which makes it seem like it's going to take a dark turn, but I don't know if it is. Because from the name of it and the fact it's a haunted house, you would think it would take a dark turn. But so far, whatever it is, Ghost has been very nice and polite and thoughtful.
Maybe it's Casper.
Could be. Casper the Dead Baby.
Have you ever heard the fan theory that Casper is actually the ghost of Richie Rich?
I have heard that. I have heard that. The artist just designed them similarly. You might say the story is going to hell. It might be or not. That's what I can't figure out.
In a handbasket?
If it takes a dark turn. Old art supplies, aren't they great? There's actually a website called the Museum of Old Art Supplies, where you can go and see. And it's funny because there are some art supplies that are like legendary in the comics community, especially that you hear about.
Like brushes.
Snowpake is a whiteout that I'd never seen it, but like all the, like when I was first breaking in the early '90s at Marvel, you'd hear all the people 10 and 20 years older than me going, I wish they still made Snowpake. And what was funny was the brushes that everybody uses to ink are Winsor Newton Series 7 watercolor brushes.
I'm not even an artist, and I know about those brushes. Yeah.
All through the early 90s, I always heard, they're not as good as they used to be, though. I wish they still made them as good as they did 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I was always like, well, they seem fine to me because, of course, that's all I know. Right. Now cut to, 2020, I'm like, I wish they made these brushes as good as they made them years ago.
I've never heard that before.
I'm like, do they not make them as good, or is it me? Because what's weird, like what's good about the Winsor Newton Series 7 is that they come to a very fine point. So you can make these real nice, smooth, thick to thin lines with them.
Yeah.
The problem is and this was always a problem, a certain number of them, right from the beginning, the point would split. Like you'd get a brand new brush, dip it in ink, and you couldn't get a point on it. The point would split, like right away almost. And also the problem with them is they get this is what ink does to them. This is supposed to come to a point. It doesn't, because the shellac in the ink destroys the Bristol. This destroys the sable, pardon me. So as soon as you dip a watercolor brush into ink, the clock is ticking on that brush being unusable. Yeah. Usually takes months and months. I've gotten plenty of use out of most of my brushes, and but the worst is when you spend $25 on a new brush, dip it, and you can't get it to come to a point. And that, I would say, in the early 90s, for me, that was like 1 out of 6 brushes, maybe. Now it's like 1 out of 2 brushes. So much so that I've been trying different brands of sable, because more people make them now. Right. I've been trying different brands just because the Winsor Newtons have failed me so often.
I think that's how Mark Schultz started. He uses on some of his newer stuff what's called a split brush technique. And I think that's where he started that, because he discovered this is not working, and then he just decided to work with it to see what he could do, and he came out with a whole new technique to use.
That's what I did with my busted brush technique, where I found a whole new way to work with one of those. Just because I didn't throw them away. I always had a few at least sitting around. I hated to throw them away, so I'd just throw them over in the old brush pile, and I'd use them for this and that until I bought this paper that was unusable. I bought this watercolor paper that was so rough I couldn't do anything with it. I just bought, because like I said, I like to try new things. Look, 5x7 watercolor paper. The surface was so rough and pebbled. I couldn't draw on it. I couldn't ink on it. I couldn't paint on it. And it sat around for a year before I said, hey, let's try to use the unusable brush on the unusable paper and see what happens. And lo and behold, I came up with this new technique that I use to this day.
Yeah.
I hid pinup pages in my Morgue file as a kid. That is an excuse if I was ever caught with them. Neil Adams probably still has a giant Morgue file in storage, probably.
Probably does.
Now it's the app. Funny, I use an Apple Pen sometimes, and I was just looking at this because it's advertised all the time in my social media feed. This plastic cover you can put on your iPad that makes it feel more like paper when you're drawing. But then I was reading the downside to it is it wears down the tip of your Apple brush, your Apple Pen. So like, another thing that wears out your art supplies. Couldn't figure out why she isn't repulsed by the ghost. He is pretty grotesque. That was another thing too. She seems to think it's all. This is in The Me You Love in the Dark, because they don't really show this ghost. We see these long, spindly fingers and scary arms, and she's just like, "Hey, Mr. Ghost." So he must be repulsed, but she's like, "You're all in my mind." Pressure-sensitive screens and the pen seems to be taking over the art world. Yeah. Like I said, I still remember it was. I do some drawing on the iPad, but it's mostly prelim stuff, nothing finished. I do some prelim pencil. Like if I have to photo reference something, I'll do it on the iPad. I'll draw right on top of it. I used to do it in Photoshop, but now the iPad's so much easier. I'll just get the photo. I'll open the photo in Procreate and just draw right on top of it, and then print that out and draw on top of that with pencil or ink. And I also do for my latest paintings, I do the color sketches in Procreate. I'll take a picture of my painting and then do color sketches, do whatever I just did on the real painting, take another picture, work out some more color on the iPad, do that on the painting, take another picture. And that's part of my process now. It's faster than doing color sketches like on paper. Where's the pencil sharpener? I have a pencil sharpener story for you. It was in the 90s. I have an old sort of school pencil sharpener that was actually in this house from the first person who lived here in 1961. That's how old the pencil sharpener is. And sometime in the mid 90s, in my studio, it's over there against this. It's attached to this bookshelf, the old pencil sharpener from 1961. And then sometime in like 1995, let's say, I splurged and got this electric pencil sharpener. I probably spent $100 on this pencil sharpener. And I was it was really, it's even one, if you get an electric pencil sharpener, the good ones are the ones that drop down from the top.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to chase it around your desk. Well, I must have used that pencil sharpener for a good couple of years. And I remember it was at a time I was particularly broke because being a freelancer, your pay rate goes up and down. And I was particularly broke at this time, and my electric pencil sharpener broke. And I was just like so upset. Here I spent $100 on this electric pencil sharpener, and it broke within a year or two. And I was just like so upset that I went back to the hand cranked sharpener that's on the side of mine from 1961, and I've been using that ever since. I do have this little one for colored pencils, but for my regular pencils, I either carve it with my X-Acto knife, if I want a special shape, or I use that school pencil sharpener from 1961.
That's why I like those Kuratoga mechanical pencils, because it has a mechanism in it that every time you lift it off the surface of the paper, it rotates the lead just a little bit.
That reminds me, I got one of those and I completely forgot about it until you mentioned it. Wow, where is it? I bought one of those this summer, and I was using it all the time.
I love those things. They're great.
I somehow forgot about it. I don't think I've seen it in 2 months.
I always preferred writing with a mechanical pencil anyways. But just,
I use a 0.7 and a 0.5 all the time.
I use
Mostly a
0.38. Yeah.
Sometimes I use a 0.9.
I have a 0.5 too, but I like the 0.38 better.
Or else I use my 6B pencil, my big one. Occasionally a general sketching pencil, which is in here somewhere. But man, I forgot about that Kurotage. I bought one from Jet Pens.
And they're cheap. I mean, you get one at Walmart for like $5.
They're not expensive.
No, they're not, but they're great. You can get the metal barrel ones more expensive, but it's not ridiculous.
I apologize. I paused the video and responding to the 3-hole punch comment. Well, I gave you the pencil sharpener story anyway.
Those pencil sharpeners, the things that you would unscrew and then hold all the shavings. Those defy the laws of physics. So no matter which way you try to bang that thing to get all the filings to fall out in the trash can or whatever, they go everywhere.
That's the kind I use. Matter of fact, I just got upset this summer because I was carrying something and banged it into the pencil sharpener. And now there's a plastic wheel on the front to change the sizes, even though you only ever use one size. It broke off a little piece of the plastic wheel. I was like, since 1961 that's been there, and I finally broke a little piece of it off. That's crazy.
But how many art supplies have been used for 60 consecutive years?
I actually have quite a few things that I've used since the summer of '84. Only like just a few certain things, like my architect's scale. I bought this the summer before I went off to art school.
Yeah, if you get a good one of those made out of metal, they'll last the rest of your life.
This one's plastic, and it's still, because you don't use it as a ruler. You just use it for measuring stuff and marking stuff, because it's not a straight edge like another ruler. But it's like certain, like the summer before I went to art school, they sent you a list of art supplies you need. So, of course, got the list, went to my local art store, bought all the stuff. Turns out not everyone is that efficient. So not only did we get there the first day and half the class had nothing, but the teacher looked at the list and went, "You don't need that. You don't need that. You don't need that." And the one I remember he said too was one of the things I bought was technical pen cleaner, which is a bottle about this big to clean stuff to clean your technical pen, which cost about $7 at the time or something like that. And he looked at that one and went $4.09, which sure enough is what it was, which cost a quarter of that. But
about 10%.
It was an art supply. Yeah. So I was just like, I felt like such an idiot after having bought all these art supplies, and didn't need a third of them.
That reminds me, in college, I didn't know till years later I could have tested out of it, but I could have tested out a 101 and 102 just based on my SAT scores. I think it was English 102, and looking at the syllabuses through the different, classes, and each one of them had a different theme. So I'm looking around in the library, and you have, little printout tags. Here's the what you're gonna be reading for this class or this semester, whatever. And the one I had picked, it was bad because this is like Charles Dickens and Great Expectations. I'm like, no, I can't do this. I got to find something different. So I'm looking around through all these, going through the bookstore and everything. I don't like that. I don't know. This is not good. And I'm getting more depressed. And then I get to one that it's Tolkien and Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. I'm like, sign my ass up. That's the one I'm taking.
I remember that charcoal pencil too. It had like a spiral outside, and you pull the string down and pull the spirals off, and it'll reveal more of the charcoal
I
pencil.
think they make grease pencils like that too.
They may, yeah. Now that you mention it, but the
That
most
doesn't
useless
sound very
art
practical.
We're showing our age here.
This is still the exact one from the summer of 1984. This is a flexible curve, and it's the most useless thing ever, because that's like no artist in the history of art supplies has been able to use this thing. It's got like a piece of soft lead or something in it, so you're supposed to be able to shape it, but it in no way, shape, or form makes a smooth curve. The curve is always herky-jerky and useless. So all everybody ever does with it is play with it. They like go, make it into a bracelet. It's like every art student had one of these and never used it because it's useless.
We used to call those idiot dazzlers.
Yeah, because it's look at that. I mean, that's not a curve. That's like chunk, chunk, chunk. I don't know. They're still around too. They're still around. Maybe it was a grease pencil that I think about. Yeah, I think they had charcoal and grease pencil ones like that. I remember those. Yeah. I saw Stan Sakai post a story on social media about a year ago about how he bought up all his pens he could find in the 90s. Yeah, when he found out they were
I was talking about that earlier. I mean, I've seen artists talking about pens, inks, papers that they try to buy up a stock that's going to last the rest of their life.
Yeah. I finally got there was one pen. Once again, I like to try out art supplies. So, and I'm not real. I'm more of a brush person than a pen person. I just don't take to the dip pens as much as the brushes, but I use them on occasion.
Wow.
So it was one day. Once again, this is a local Manhattan. This is like 3 blocks from Marvel, a little Manhattan art store. Had a whole bunch of these pen tips, like where is it?
Yes.
Like this stuff right here, these dip pens where there's the tip. Where is it? There's the tip, and you drop it in a pen holder. This type of stuff. And they had a bunch of them in the clearance bin for $0.05 a piece, just like 12 different tips. So I was like, I'll try these out. So I took like one a piece of the 12 different tips. And not being a pen person, I didn't even try them out for like a year. I found one tip out of the 12 I really liked. But of course I couldn't get it anymore. The year had passed. Well, and I'm like, it was $0.05. Why didn't I buy 10 of each tip?
Because you didn't know at the time.
I didn't know at the time. I was young and didn't know I'm supposed to do stuff.
I would love to have a time machine and go back to some bookstores that were around when I was a kid. And buy stuff that I wish I didn't know about back then.
Yeah. And there was one other pen tip. I only ever had one of them at the time, like all through the 90s. John Romita knew which one it was. He said a lot of people used to use it back in the day, but it kind of disappeared. Was it called a Gillot 1950 was the name of it. Gillot is the name of the pen company, Gillot. And I had this one Gillot 1950s tip that I used to use like for one purpose, to make these little tick marks on my drawing. That was like all I'd use it for. And then one day I dropped it and it was gone. I was like, until like about 10 years ago, I found one company selling them on the internet. So I ordered like 20 of them. I was like, okay, they got Gillot. The only place I've ever seen them for sale. It was weird. You got to watch out with it. There was one Scott Koblish issue of Deadpool. Maybe it was Deadpool Art of War. That had a bit that I liked in it where for some reason Deadpool was time travel. Hitler showed up in it. But Hitler had all these cool weapons. because time travelers kept coming from the future to try and kill him, and they'd not be successful, and he'd get their weapons.
That's not the first time I've heard that story either. That's a
Yeah,
kind
so now he was like, oh, another time traveler, hold on, and blasts him and gets his way. It was just like, Scott, dude, go to the stockbroker first, then go to the bookstore.
See, I wouldn't even worry about going to the stockbroker first. I would go to the sports betting first. Because I've got the scores for every World Series and Super Bowl and downs, for the next 30 years. Make a lot of money that way.
Yeah, that was the plot of Back to the Future 2.
Let's see, I got 9 comics this week, probably because 3 of them were supposed to be delivered last week, but Diamond didn't. It's one of the Bad Idea comics I worked on, Pirate Queen #2. I've been enjoying this one. Peter Milligan writing it, Adam Polina writing it, Tamra Bonvillain doing the colors. A period piece about this woman who she and her husband were a pirate.
Can you hold that up a little bit closer to the camera?
I
just wanted to see the art a little bit better.
Let me go to solo layout so you can see it. Let me get a good page. Hold on.
Okay.
That doesn't look like Adam Polina, I remember.
No, it does not look like 90s X-Men Adam Polina.
I don't know.
There's the cover. I'm really enjoying the drawing.
Okay.
Let me see if I get another good page. There's another good page over there.
Okay.
Yeah, it really looks piratey. And the story's good too. It's turned into a revenge story because in the first issue, the British military guy was given orders to clean up the sea of pirates. It was it used to happen all the time in history where, if the English and Spanish were at war, then they encourage the pirates to raid each other's ships.
Absolutely.
But then when they settled their differences, they had to clean the pirates up, which meant, killing the pirates. So one day you had the king's blessing, and the next day you didn't. So now the British military is going after the pirates, and they went after her and her husband, killed her husband. Now she's on she was pregnant at the time, so they didn't want to kill a pregnant woman, so they set her adrift. Luckily, she was rescued, and now she's on a revenge mission. So that's what it's turned into. Still pregnant on a revenge mission, mind you. She's like, I'm not even waiting for the baby to be born. I want my revenge now.
It's order 66 in the 1800s.
I prefer the sex myth starring Pulverine.
Terrence.
Terrence. He does. And the other one I got.
No idea. Yeah.
Another Bad Idea one that I worked on, Monster Kill Squad. I don't like this one as much as I like Pirate Queen, but it's still pretty good. This one is Christos Gage, Thomas Giorello. So once again, the art is nice. Let me show you the art.
Yeah, Giorello did a bunch of Conan stuff for Dark Horse.
Yeah, he doesn't. It's all penciled and not inked, but he's inking with the pencil, kind of.
Right.
And it's they're fighting monsters. Oh, and this is the one I was trying to figure out if I don't know if you saw if the varnish on the cover warped it a little bit. Looks a little. It's tough to see on screen. But it's the first time I noticed because I've been the one part of what I do for Bad Idea is to indicate where the varnish goes. So I always check the varnish when I get one of these. And I noticed that it's sort of warped a little along the edge. Like I think the shapes of the varnish warped the cover a little. It hasn't done that to any of the other ones. Like this on the back has there's varnish over the complete art here. And there doesn't seem to be any warping. But the varnish here follows the edge of the monster and follows the so it's like there's areas in here that aren't varnished, and there's areas around it that are varnished. So I'm wondering if that little bit of varnish warped the cover ever so slightly, because it's not over one big area. Just a technical point this made me think about when I first picked it up.
I wonder if humidity has anything to do with that too.
Yeah, it could. It could, as the varnish lays down, as the humidity in the building, that who knows?
One thing I've noticed in my local Barnes and Noble store, and you don't notice as much in the winter, but in the summer, sometimes the paperback covers will curl slightly, and it's all due to being too humid.
Yeah, that does happen for sure. It's time for a random Conan card. Let's see. Let's see what we get. Oh, this one's not even. It's from the Conan book. Do you recognize that?
Yeah, that's the Kung Fu ad.
Yeah, that's the karate ad that was in so many comics in the 70s. I was like, I should put that on a card.
You should do one. Yeah, go ahead.
Mac, the Death Touch. What was the name of the guy that did the ads in the 70s?
Oh, that's right. Count Dante.
I was getting ready to see you should find the red Count Dante ad.
Yeah.
Put that on one of those cards.
Oh, we can make that a chase card. The Count Dante card.
Count Dante. There's actually a book, I can't remember the name of it. My friend Bunch had it, and I read his copy. That's all about the history of the ads and comic books in the 60s and 70s.
Right.
So it goes through Dante's history, who he really was, and all the different ads, from the bubblegum to the X-ray specs to this and that. It gave you the history of the little companies who placed those ads.
The Johnson Company, I remember specifically, did a lot of those.
Count Dante had that pose, like that scary pose or something.
Yeah, he was kind of a shady character too. I did some reading up about him. He was
that's what they said in this history book.
Died at a fairly young, not young, but a younger than normal age due to violence. You should do a Sea Monkeys post up.
Mm-hmm.
One of your cards.
I'll cut whatever I find in these comics. I'll put on a card.
Or the Orca. The Orca
Star Wars one. And we get these guys. What's so strange about this Star Wars issue 12 that I picked? This one, what is he saying? Stop firing. They're out of range, running off like whipped womp rats. As the first 2 pages take place on water with like sea dragons. So it's that's where those dragons come from. So it's like not what you expect from Star Wars.
I remember they had like these watercraft, almost like the land speeders, except they went over water instead.
By the way, this card really bothers me in that it's one of the few that I didn't get on as straight as I'd want to get it on. It was like ever so slightly off, and that's all I see. I'm like, but once it's in place, I can't maneuver it at all. If I don't notice it right away, it's doomed. Let's see the next comic I got this week. Norse Mythology, issue number 5 of 6. The Apples of Immortality, with art by Gabriel Hernandez Walta. What was it? Mind the Comics who told me what else he drew on my YouTube video. Now all of a sudden it flew out of my head. But this looks like actual watercolor. Only because the blacks look muted, which happens sometimes when with actual watercolor scanned in. I'm not saying you couldn't do that digitally. Vision, there he goes. This is the guy who drew the Vision Tom King comic, who's working over Craig Russell layouts, and it's just real. This is the story of Loki being tricky and accidentally losing what's her name, who has the Idun, who has the apples of immortality that keep the gods alive and young. And he kind of lost them to a storm giant. And he lost and tried to play it off until the gods started growing old and like, where's Idun? And they're like, Loki, and Loki's like, hopefully they won't know they have no way of knowing I had anything to do with it. And they're like,
Yeah.
You were the last one seen with her, Loki. Where is she? He's like, I don't know what happened. And Thor's like, I will smash your head in. And Odin was like, I ain't playing. You either get those apples back or I'm killing you right now. And Loki's like, okay, I'll see what I can do.
What a drama queen.
Yeah,
that Odin over there is a drama queen.
Yeah. But they were having none of Loki's, I didn't do it. They were like, yes, you did. You better handle this or we will handle you. Because you're still looking young and you ain't going to be living if we're dying.
What you talking about, Loki?
But both, like I said, this is volume 2. Volume 1 is available in trade, and they're just both so good.
They're good stuff.
They're just such well done comics, and it's just telling the stories, the Old Norse stories, but telling them well.
If you haven't listened to the audio adaptation of that,
No,
there's a couple of them. There's one that was done by the BBC.
because it's originally a Neil Gaiman novel.
Yeah.
So,
but the BBC adaptation, that's really good because they have a lot of well-known voice actors, like Diana Rigg was on there. Sound effects were fantastic. It's good stuff. Hello, Damien.
Good evening. Welcome aboard. We're talking comics, art supplies, and
mostly art supplies.
yeah, a lot of art supplies tonight. We're getting a lot of art supplies.
Get your art supplies. I got your art supplies right here.
Here. You know what's funny too? Here is I'll turn it off right now. My light. I have one of these magnifying lamps. Now I bought this magnifying lamp in the early 90s. I used it as my light here now, but I never used it. It's like for 30 years I used it as a light, but I had no use for the magnifier most of the time. And when I started making those, not these magic cards, but my altered art ones where I had to strip the I had to use acetone to strip the ink off. What I would do is I'd have to get Frisket. You know what Frisket is?
It's a fixative, isn't it?
No, it's a clear plastic that you use for airbrushing. You'd use for masking out the parts of a airbrush painting. So you'd put the clear plastic down and you'd gently cut with an X-Acto blade and you'd lift up the part that you wanted to paint on. But it's clear, really thin, really clear. So I was using some of that to mask out the parts of the card I didn't want the acetone on. And it was a bit of a struggle because the plastic, I have to line up clear plastic with one of these edges here. So I'm like, I got my reading glasses on. I'm going to, I'm lining it up. It must have taken me a year before I had the realization, why don't I use my magnifying lamp? That's been on my desk for decades.
Yeah.
Because I never had a use for it before, besides, shining light on stuff.
Right.
So I actually started using my magnifying lamp to put the Frisket on. I was like, wow, this is so much easier. It's almost as if it was made for something like this.
Who'd have thunk it?
Who'd have thunk it? Living in Newfoundland and working in archaeology for 15 years, all Viking stuff has been ruined for me. But that art, on your recommendation of the comic, I might give it a go. Yeah, it's good stuff, that Norse mythology book. Scott recommends it. Sleepy Reader will recommend it.
It'll bring a tear to your eye.
What we got going on tonight. It really is. Good tip, Goblin. Newfoundland, isn't that where GPAP lives too?
Don't know.
Where is he on? He's in. Oh, now I can't remember. Oh, geez, all of a sudden I can't remember.
I've never watched any of his videos. I don't know where he's from.
He hasn't made any in ages. Yeah. Definitely recommend the Norse mythology comic.
Yeah,
There's another
it's
voice
really
for it,
good.
right? It is really good.
And I've harped on this channel too. But if you haven't seen Craig's ring cycle work, he did the Ring of the Nibelung. It's freaking fantastic. Some of the best ones ever made by anybody anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah, how big the lens on this is about 5 or 6 inches maybe. Yep, GPAP is there, I think, right? Newfoundlander. Yeah, because he's a goofy newfie. That's where, if you're working in Newfoundland, do you know where, let me reach this back here. This was where my father was stationed in the Air Force in the early 60s. Baffin Island, Northwest Territories. Ever do any archaeology up there? He was watching the polar north. He was operating the radar, watching the polar north for Soviet nukes coming over the horizon, coming over the North Pole.
The Northern Lights now are starting to get as low as Northern Virginia.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
People were starting to talk about just the other day. They were starting to notice it.
Another comic I got this week, Homesick Pilots number 10. I think the series is going to continue because it ended right before the big battle. And the first trade paperback was 5 issues. And the second, it says this volume 2 is coming out in November. Volume 2 trade paperback. Mm-hmm. But they left it off right before the big battle between the haunted house and the nuclear bastard mech, ghost-powered mech.
It's such a bizarre story.
It is so bizarre. But it's kind of straightforward teenager. They're just all caught up in this, though. They're caught up in this crazy, crazy situation. And then there's this one. This made an appearance, too. This somehow ghost-powered tank. Haunted house tank.
That's actually kind of neat. Like that.
Oh, we got a Northern Lights comment. Oops. Oop, there we go. First was our Northern Light. Yeah, there were crazy visible here the other night. Have a look for a picture of light. Great doc about the Northern Lights. Baffin Islands is in Nunavut, but yes, I worked for a Baffin Island company there. Oh, look at that. Odd coincidence. There was a lot of military bases there.
A lot of military bases everywhere in Europe.
My father was on one of them in the early 60s.
There's military bases that people don't know about, too.
Yeah. Giving out those, what are the number stations that were in Lost that are real? Hey, Paolo, do you have did you put together a read, rip, and tear for us this week?
I gave you the link, but I didn't put it up. Didn't do the...
You didn't put the pictures together?
No, I didn't put the pictures together.
You got to put the pictures together for us.
I got to put the pictures together. I'll do it next week.
Yeah, next week. We'll do one. I have a few from last week that I never did. So let me call one of them up, and we'll do one now just for the heck of it. Where is... Oops, down here. Let me share my screen. Let's see. What one do I have up?
Oh,
there we go. I don't think I did this one. There we go. This is comics from May 1988. We've got Cops #1, Starman #1, and Speedball #1. How's that for a collection? And that's the Starman nobody likes.
That's not true.
It's mostly true.
Sleepy wants to dock Paolo his
He's not
show check from tonight.
Pay it anyway.
Joke's on you. I'm doing this for free.
You are?
The joke's on you. You're doing it for free.
Yeah, totally. Where's my money?
Scott and I are making big money.
Yeah. I'm going to steal the fantastic car and fly to Latvia. Then I'm going to walk up to Dr. Doom and say, "Where's my money, honey?"
Okay, Power Man.
I'm going to read Starman.
Uh-huh.
The other two I could care less about. I'm going to slab Cops because I like the cover better, and rep up Speedball because I really hate the colors on that cover.
It's the yellow, man. Look at
It's
that.
not just the
Yellow.
yellow on that doesn't really bother me so much. It's just that combination of colors.
Doc Paolo some free.
That red around the blue on the logo. Ugh, I don't like it.
I think I'm gonna slab Speedball.
Okay.
And I'm gonna rip up Starman and read Cops.
I have no idea what Cops is about. I never even heard
Neither
of it.
do I. Who does it? It's got a little.
It's a cartoon
Vince,
adaptation.
Roderick, and Martel. Yeah.
It's a cartoon adaptation. I used to watch it when I was a kid. I actually liked that.
Okay.
Yeah. They were like the G.I. Joe cartoon, but they were a police force and everybody had different abilities, and it was weirder.
Speedball is Ditko, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Starman is Roger Stern, Tom Lyle, and Bob Smith.
See, that's good. Roger Stern and Tom
I
Lyle.
think I'd rather read Pat Broderick artwork. I'll read Cops, rip Starman, and slab Speedball. Because, may as well slab some Ditko a Ditko first issue that's bound to be a lot of money someday, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the Ditko that nobody cares about.
Yeah, I
1989
know.
Ditko.
That cover ain't doing a thing for me.
Slab Speedball, rip Cops, and read Starman. Hey.
I'm going to slab Starman just because of the cover and read Cops just to see if it's anything like the cartoon, and rip Speedball because that character went nowhere until he was used in the New Warriors.
Did they make him dark and gritty?
Yes. Twice. In different versions.
They made him dark and gritty and then darker and grittier.
Yes.
Because he was such a fun, goofy character that you just knew that someone was
going to
go.
Yeah, but then they gave him to Mark Miller. Or was it Bendis? No, it was Mark Miller. It was Civil War. But it did have a part of it. Man, I need to be grimmer and grittier, so I'm going to start using a trench coat. I mean, he jumps around, but he wears a trench coat.
Number station.
You can blame it on Fabian Nicieza.
Okay. Yeah, the Lost introduced everybody to number stations. So, you guys know what those are? It's some shortwave radio station that they don't know where it originates, and it just reads off numbers all day.
There's different.
Where's the light?
Yeah, there's different theories about what those actually are.
Maybe martial law might be light and gritty. I don't know. Maybe not.
Light and gritty. Cheerful violence would be Big Guy and Rusty the Robot.
Okay.
And maybe Shaolin Cowboy.
Maybe you're right. Light and gritty might be Shaolin Cowboy.
I mean, it's not light, but it's more comical.
It's not gritty either.
No, it's more like think Looney Tunes, but with actual gore. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I never got. I have one Shaolin Cowboy book, but I never really got that into it. Just because, like I said, it is so. He
One of the
likes
other
your.
chats, I can't remember if it was the chats that Damien LaRosse and
Yeah, they've talked about
Earl Grey
Shaolin.
do, but somebody was talking about Jeff Darrow recently.
Yeah, they were.
And I got a kick, and then I went back and watched some of the animated episodes of Big Guy Rusty because a friend of mine had burned a bunch of them on the discs, but I couldn't find the disc. I thought, well, I'll go watch these. And it really made me want to have Jeff Darrow do more Big Guy and Rusty comics. It's like,
It'd be nice if he did more comics in general, but.
oh yeah, I mean, well, I got this kick. It's like I wish he was still doing that. I'm stuck in the early 2000s, I guess. I wish Art Adams was still doing Monkey Man and O'Brien.
Where's Jeff Darrow from?
I don't know where he's from originally, but he lives in France now.
Oh, was he European?
No, he's originally American.
He was American? Okay, I just never thought of that.
I don't know where he grew up. I could Google it and find out. I'm not sure where in the country.
I was just curious.
But he had lived in France for a long time, moved back to America, and has since moved back to France again.
Okay.
Now, that's going to bug me. Now I got to find out. I'll have to find out where he's from. It's going to drive me.
Now he wants to know.
Now I want to know.
I gots to know. Where is Jeff Darrow from?
Where's Jeff?
GEOFF. He's a GEO guy, right?
Yeah.
One guy at Marvel I used to work with was a JEOFF. I'm like, what's that all about?
Jeff Darrow was born in Cedar Rapids, Iowa.
Okay.
Now, where he lived, I don't know, but that's where he was born. He went to the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts.
Okay.
And said in the late 70s, he moved to L.A. and joined Hanna-Barbera as a character designer.
Ah.
Oh, okay. So he, during his time in animation, Darrow became acquainted with such comic and animation industry as Jack Kirby, Alex Toth, Tech Avery, Dave Stevens, and he also met Mobius while he was working out there too.
Wow.
Interesting.
Those are some good connections.
Yeah.
Of course, they were all screwed over by comics, so they probably weren't thrilled about giving too much advice on it.
No.
Working in animation will get you screwed over as well.
That is true. Let's not forget that.
Yeah. None of those industries have a monopoly on screwing people over.
And I know animation can pay pretty well for certain jobs.
Yes.
And terrible for others.
That's very
true. You're always on a contract, a short-term contract.
Have you ever seen the documentary about the life of Floyd Norman?
No.
It's really good. Because if people don't know, Floyd Norman's probably one of the first major black animators that worked at Disney.
Right.
Started a long time ago. I think Floyd's in his late 80s now.
Was he one of the 7 old men or whatever?
No, he was not one of those 7 guys. But
he was a young man.
Yeah, when he started, I think he may have even started before he was 20. But it goes through all the details of not only just working for Disney and whatnot, but for being a black man and how they were treated over the years. You know, it's worth watching. It's really good stuff.
And speaking of history, the 6th and final issue of Howard Chaykin's Hey Kid Comics Volume 2 came out this week. And I think one of these guys is a thinly veiled version of Howard Chaykin. He's the one who...
That wouldn't surprise me if he did.
Yeah, because the gray-haired guy up here is Gil Kane. And it's his assistant and buddy, who I assume is Howard Chaykin. And somebody in this a lot of this takes place in the 70s. and somebody up at DC/Yankee Comics hated Gil Kane, and he couldn't get work there anymore, and also wouldn't give Howard Chaykin work there at that time because he was Gil Kane's assistant.
Gotcha.
And they were like, "Oh, that guy's gone now. Maybe you can get work." But then there was this other guy who's like, "Oh, you think because that guy's gone, I'm going to be nice to you?" No. So it's really and one guy, what was his name? He's clearly Roy Thomas. Where does it say? Something about his overwriting. Where is it now? Oh, here it is. Don Metcalf. Desire to be a novelist shows in all of those overstuffed balloons. That's clearly the Roy Thomas character. That and he was, he was buddy with the Stan Lee character. So, but look at that cast list for this last issue. All these tiny little heads with one line. Well, I've been enjoying this year. It's the second volume that I bought. So,
has he said anything about there going to be a third volume?
I have not heard.
I just wondered.
I have not heard. But it's like they're in the 70s now, and here they are. Here's some of the old timers doing some of these socially conscious stuff. See, this is what happened. A lot of this book was you get them working with whoever, and then you get them that night in the bar. So it's like here they are. This might be Marie Severin working on Dazzler. Here's I forget who the guy working on Luke Cage Power Man-like character, and here they are the Spider-Man drug issues, and the writers are all like, "It's time we got modern women in this world." I feel like we're getting closer to the heart of racism in every issue. We've got a great opportunity here to address the issue of drugs in America. And the artists are all going, absolutely, sure. This Tarantula Lad is a great place for that. Then they're at the bar that night saying stuff like, DeHoven thinks Superfly, they're all making fun of the writers for being so out of touch. Thinks Superfly is a training film. You haven't lived until you've had women. This is the woman saying this. Yeah. You haven't lived until you've had women's liberation explained to you by Jess Mayberg, who might be the Stan Lee. Let's see which can. Whoever he is, where is Jess Mayberg? Yankee editor, source of industry unity. Everyone hates him. So he was one of the DC editors, one of the old DC editors. Oh, I guess she was working on
Mort Wessinger or anybody.
Yeah, she was working on Wonder Woman. That must have been it. So, but they made it the Dazzler here. So like I said, I think the woman character is a composite of a few different actual women. And I think the black artist is a composite of a few different guys too. Because he seemed to be Matt Baker, there's a new guy who came up here, but he seemed to be Matt Baker in the 50s. But I don't know that Matt Baker made it out of the 50s. I think he died young.
He died in 58.
Yeah,
59.
How do you pull
58
that
to 59.
Just like 1958. Wow.
He remembers.
I remember the Battle of Hastings was in 1066, but
yeah, I remembered. I don't think he made it out of the 50s. That's as close as I.
Yeah, he was young. He was in his early 30s when he died.
39, I think he was.
Yeah,
if I remember correctly. Was it 39? Yeah, died young. Matt Baker.
Mm-hmm.
I just found out either yesterday or today that good Lord, Dave Stevens was my age now when he passed away.
Oh yeah.
He didn't get to live long enough.
I was watching an episode of Cheers, 4th season, and it was Norm's birthday, and they told his age, and I was like, "What?"
Yeah.
36.
Yeah.
I was like, he's only 36 in the 4th season of Cheers? That meant he was 32 in the season? Because he seemed like he was 50 from day one.
Right.
Mhm.
And now he's 36. It's like, whoa.
What did Norm do? I can't remember.
A mailman. Oh no, pardon me, that was Cliff. Norm
Yeah,
was,
Cliff was.
first he was an accountant.
Mm.
That was his original job. Then he was an out-of-work accountant for the longest time. Then he became a painter / interior decorator.
I don't think
Have you-
he'd be good at it. Because what I remember from Norm was that he was always at the bar.
Yeah. He was
Yeah.
unemployed for a good long time. Like I said, and then, like I said, he started painting stuff for people. He'd be a painter. And then he discovered, as he says, he always knows where to stick the ottoman.
Sounds like
People
you.
started hiring to do the interior decorating, and I think he even had to be he had to pretend to be gay for some clients too. I remember it was one episode because they didn't want a straight beer guzzling interior decorator. Yeah, house painter. He did that later on, but he was not outside of houses, inside of houses.
According to this,
I gotta-
getting back into acting again.
Wow. The Geese. He's the oldest young guy I've ever met. He's surly, like he's been working for 50 years. He's in his early 30s. Wow. Gore, how are you? How are you, Gore? Norm warmed a bar seat most of the time. But I was like, Norm's only 36 in season 4? Whoa. That's kind of crazy. Norm, what's up, Norm? My nipples. It's freezing out there.
He had so many one-liners. I think my favorite one, somebody asked him what's shaking. He said all 4 cheeks and both chins.
What's going on, Mr. Peterson? Let's talk about what's going in, Mr. Peterson.
Yeah, being the oldest young guy, I remember when I had to do the spectator guide for the Algarve Historic Festival, and we kind of and my boss kind of had to convince the organizer that I knew what I was talking about. But I started talking about racing drivers from the 1950s, and he said, "Oh, okay." Because at 29, I was not supposed to know about racing drivers from the 1950s.
Right.
There you go. How did you know about that? One more comic I got this week is our Italian comic, Deep Beyond. What was this, number 9 of 12? And this one got gory and political and mean this issue. Because this is the one that started out sort of as a little post-apocalyptic story and then went hard sci-fi, right, where it takes place, and sort of like something went wrong with the atmosphere. Everybody lives in these domed cities and those sort of post-apocalyptic. And there's these, I don't know, rebels. I don't know what they're rebelling against. But down at the bottom of the ocean is this, undersea station where it's like a portal to another dimension where these aliens are. And so some of our like rebel people ended up there and ended up going over to the alien side. And sort of that was like the real sci-fi part of the story. But meanwhile, like the authorities back on Earth do not like these alien people. And they've been trying to have, though this portal has been up for decades, if not 100 years, interaction is very limited between the aliens and the humans. For whatever reason, our guys got over there, and they recently sent the humans sent some spies over there too to do what, I don't know. So this whole issue was our people who were the rebels coming back, being taken prisoner by the authorities, being betrayed by the authorities, and all this crazy espionage stuff happening. Where now you're like, what's going on? Are they just going to kill everybody at the end of this series?
No.
But a fun issue. If, like I said, the guy got part of his head blown off in a cube at the very beginning of this. But don't worry, they fixed it. Wow. The alien technology fixed it. But that was the woman who was a spy all along, who tried to kill that guy. It was just like, It's been a wild ride. I've been enjoying this one thoroughly. It's a solid comic. It's one of those, the art is around an A. In general, it's like a solid B+ comic. It's not the greatest comic of all time, but it's good. It's worth your time reading.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's just it. What are you rebelling against? What do you got? I'm not really sure what because, like I said, it started out as the setup was sort of this, 100 years in the future, humanity has to live in these domed cities, and I guess there's a certain amount of authoritarianism in the domed cities, and these people living outside the domed cities don't want anything to do with the authorities. And the first scene in the comic was this terrorist act where the rebels blew up somebody in the city. But after that, nothing really, besides the fact that the authorities don't like these guys who are the rebels. I don't really get a sense of what they're rebelling against. So
well, they're probably just wearing blue. They're just wearing blue jeans, pompadour hairs, and listening to rock and roll.
Driving fast on
their pink Cadillacs.
That could be it. But yeah, it's been a good series. I'm glad I stumbled onto that one.
Good.
This week I've also been I don't know if you saw the videos I posted this week. I started making the couple of videos where I read a comic and then talk to the camera for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So I started rereading Negation by Tony Bedard and Paul Pelletier. And it's just real good. That's one of my favorite sort of action comics. Just kind of sci-fi superhero action chase scene comic. And I realized it's very much like the latest the first season of the What If TV show. Did you guys watch any of that?
I haven't seen any of it.
Well, the last story has the last story in the What If has what if Ultron won. So Ultron conquers Earth. Then he goes on to conquer the whole universe. And then he discovers the Watcher is watching him. And he discovers there's a multiverse. So now Ultron wants to conquer the whole multiverse. Well, in this cross-gen comic, which is from, 2001, there's a guy called, what's his name? His name just flew out of my head. Whoever the big bad guy is, he conquered his whole universe. And he just discovered the cross-gen universe. And now he wants to conquer the cross-gen universe, but he's kind of very careful about it. So he brought over a bunch of powerful guys from the cross-gen universe to test them. And he originally had them in this prison, and they broke out of the prison, which he kind of let them break out. Charon, that's his name. He kind of let them break out of the prison because he wants to see what they can do. He doesn't fear them at all. He conquered a whole universe. So he's just kind of like, whatever, they're loose. That's okay. I want to see what they can do. So they're running around trying to figure out what they can do, what they're going to do, because it took them issues to even discover they're not in their universe. They're in an alternate universe. And like some of the cross-gen guys, I don't know if you guys ever read cross-gen books, but the whole sort of this whole sort of unifying point of cross-gen was a bunch of these characters in different worlds had these sigils on them, the cross-gen logo, basically. And that gave them superpowers. So they had like a medieval knight book. The guy had that on it, had superpowers. They had this sort of mystical fairy tale aimed at girls one, where she had this, once again, that gave her superpowers in her world. And she's like, and no one knew where these sigils came from or how they worked or all this stuff. But it turns out, you find out, and it was all supposed to culminate in Negation War, but the company went out of business 3 months before the series ended. So it turned out these sigils, somebody in the cross-gen universe gave to these people to try to see what they can do as a defense against Charon, because they knew that he was going to be coming over to try and conquer their universe, and he had a good chance of doing it. So now, like I said, negation is all about these people. They're sigils. Some of them work in this universe, some of them don't. Some of them, and they're just kind of this group of. Some of them have weird powers. Some they're all together and they're stealing a spaceship, and they don't know what they're going to do. Like most of it is a chase scene of them running from all the people who are hunting them in the negation universe. And it
sounds like the A-Team.
Yeah, it's sort of, now that you mention it, it sort of is like the A-Team. They occasionally go on missions, and but it's just such a well done comic that nobody knows about.
I've never heard of it.
No one even knows negation exists, but it's probably it would be in my, I don't know, it would be in my top whatever list of comics, and it's not deep. It's not full of insight and meaning. It's just a very well done, fun action comic. It reads fast, but like I read one issue, put my earbuds in, hit video on the phone, talk for 2 or 3 minutes, stop, go back, read another issue, do the same thing. I do that over the course of a day. Then I link them all together on the, in a video editing, not even doing any editing, just slap them together and output them. And I posted that too. That's my new video format I'm going to try using.
That kind of reminds me
I called it Reading a Run. That's it.
Gotcha.
The first one had the first video about 20 minutes long, had the first 6 issues. The second video about 20 minutes long had the next, I think, 5 issues.
Right.
That's how I kind of want to reread Frank Miller's Daredevil that way. Because I still have all my original Frank Miller's Daredevil, but I haven't read them since the 80s.
I think I've only read like 2 or 3 issues of Miller's Daredevil, so I'm not.
Oh, I bought it. I bought it off the stand.
As far as that goes.
I was lucky in that I started buying Daredevil off the stands about 2 or 3 issues before Miller got on. So I was there from the beginning. Roger McKenzie was writing it at first. He was doing a good job too. Then Miller took over the writing and did even a better job.
I was just going to comment. I don't know why, but your description of negation, not so much story-wise and plot-wise, but I think just the general setup or tone of it, reminded me that I've always wanted to read Top 10 by Alan Moore.
Yeah, I've never read that one.
And I've heard good things about it.
Yeah.
I've seen some of the art, but the artwork looks pretty decent.
Yeah.
But,
I may have read the first issue of that. That's it. And like one of the last issues I read of negation, sometimes that has a sense of humor too, because one of the characters in negation is a woman and her baby. So she was in the prison with them, a woman, newborn baby. And just been a normal baby the whole time. And then just around the 9th, 10th issue, there's these characters called the Lawbringers, I think it is. And they're like the top henchmen of Charon. So they're like the Silver Surfer superpowered guys. They can do anything. They got all sorts of powers. If one of the Lawbringers shows up, you're just dead. You're screwed. You don't have the power to fight a lawgiver. I forget which one it is. So he shows up to mess with. He wants to, like, the most powerful people in the cross-gen universe are these guys called the First. Once again, they have all god level powers. They're all like Odin and Zeus and Thor, that level of power. So, and there's a whole bunch of them in the cross-gen universe. And so, this guy heard that one of them was in the negation universe. He's like, I want to take her on. I want to see what she can do. Like, these guys are so powerful, they really don't even fear when they hear someone else is real powerful. They're just like, whatever. I want to take them on. I want to see how powerful they really are. Because they're Charon's right-hand men. And they've never seen anything that can take him on. So he's fighting him, and he's not having too hard a time with it. But at one point, he shoots this blast to kill the woman and her newborn baby. Except it doesn't affect the baby. So the lawbringer is like, what the heck is that? I just plasma blasted that baby, and he's not even mussed. So he's like, now I'm interested in the baby. So he goes over and takes the baby and just leaves and goes back to Charon, who's busy torturing somebody we don't even know who's from the CrossGen universe. And then Charon's like, why are you bothering me? And I'm busy torturing this guy to find information. Because I got this indestructible baby. So then they spend the whole issue, Charon and the other, trying to kill. It was like a Looney Tunes cartoon. They're trying to kill the baby, but they can't. So they got this, they got this full page print up of the baby being electrocuted. They can't. They got this full, like they're dropping like this giant cinder, this 10-story tall cinder block on the baby, but it's all just crumbles around him. The baby's like, goo goo gaga. Finally, they nuke the baby. You see a mushroom cloud. and then you see the baby just sitting there. And you're like, holy cow. And then finally Charon comes up and picks up the baby and goes, boo. And the baby starts crying like a normal baby. Right. And that was kind of, but that whole issue was like a Looney Tunes.
That's actually kind of funny.
Yeah, the only thing missing is if the baby suddenly speaks and says, you realize, of course, this means war.
Yeah. Top 10 is good. I have the first 8 issues and picked up the second and hardcover at Ollie's. Thanks, Tim, for $8. Yeah. CrossGen. I want to get more CrossGen book. I bought about half to maybe 2/3 of them at the time. They were actually expensive books at the time. I think they were $3 an issue in like 2001, and most comics were like $2 an issue, maybe $2.50.
Dark Horse was already $3.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the like real, like a lot of the like indie stuff was already $3, but. CrossGen was kind of more mainstream. Chuck Dixon talks about it on his channel. What happened? Check out his channel. I'm going to have to check that out. I just stumbled onto, there's a Mark Alessi interview out there too from like 2016. He's the guy he was the owner of CrossGen who started it. Who I think he died young. He was like 65, and just a couple of years ago he died. But he was the one who had the idea to bring them all together but then he lost his money in a not his fault, in a scandal he was a tech guy. He invented some software code. He sold it to, I forget, some Enron like company. I forget which one it was. You'd recognize the scandal if I gave it to you in Texas. And so he was bought out by this big company for like millions and millions and millions of dollars, which is what he started CrossGen with. That's what allowed him to start his dream company, CrossGen. Right. But what happened then was the company got caught up in an Enron-like scandal, and most of his money was in their stock because that's what he got paid in. Yeah. And he probably couldn't sell it all for a certain amount of time. And then the company went out of business because they got caught up in a scandal, and there went all his money. And there's something with who was it? One of those big movie directors, not George Lucas, but the other one from
Spielberg.
Was that Spielberg? I think had some option on something that a lot of money was supposed to come into CrossGen, but he never could make his mind up if he wanted to do it or not. And CrossGen ran out of time before he made up his mind. Yeah. He is very accessible, and a lot of Civil War books he wrote and signed them and drew a picture. And that's Chuck Dixon. Yeah, I never read. Chuck Dixon is one of those writers I haven't read a ton of, but his stuff was always on. Whenever I read something by Chuck Dixon, it was always a solid. But since he mainly wrote mainstream superhero stuff, I never read a ton of his stuff. I think he wrote the CrossGen Sigil book, which is one of the ones I never bought, but I want to get now. Yeah, and I think it has 40. That was the more military type book. It was a story of a military guy who had a sigil, and there was the humans versus the lizard people war that was going on in his sector of the galaxy.
Kind of like the Green Lantern Corps.
Yeah. The owner had all the money in some stock. Yeah, that's what I was just saying. It wasn't just it was his money was in a stock of the company that paid for his company. And that company, the parent company that bought his, got caught up in a scandal and went out of business, like an Enron-like scandal. That famous too. I can't even remember what it was. He wrote everything. Yeah, I know I've read Chuck Dixon stuff, and everything I've read by Chuck Dixon has been. And the one thing I can remember that I like that he has is Winter World that he did with Jorge Zafino. I bought that because of the Jorge Zafino stuff. Yeah. Do you remember that?
No, I just had to look it up because he mentioned the Civil War thing. But Gary, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I think it's Kwapis. It's Kwapis.
Oh, Kwapis.
Thank you. He was a guest at a couple local conventions here a few years ago. He must live somewhere in either Virginia, North Carolina, somewhere in that area. But he was doing the art on those Civil War books that Chuck Dixon wrote.
Ah. Okay. I guess Chuck Dixon has a free digital comic website called... I have a free digital comic website called RadiantComics.com.
Oh, what?
In fact, I was just having trouble with it this morning and had to consult a friend, but then it all cleared up on its own.
Thank God for Google, because if it didn't exist, my brain would be mad with me right now. What's the name of the guy that wrote Nexus with Steve
Barron? Mike Barron.
Mike Barron. Okay. I always get Chuck Dixon and Mike Barron confused with each other.
Okay.
Winter World. I don't remember that at all.
I don't remember that either. I remember a few of the second run of books, which I liked. Way of the Rat, Route 666.
I only bought an issue or two of that, but it was pretty good. Way of the Rat, I bought all the way through.
And Ruse, which I loved.
Ruse is really good. Ruse, I think that's the best Butch Geis artwork out there. Is Ruse.
Mm-hmm. They should make they should make a really nice hardcover of that and call it the Elaborate Ruse.
Quit laughing so hard. It only encourages them. Yeah, what were the other El Cazador?
El Cazador.
Oh, yeah.
I
remember seeing that.
Steve drew that. That was really nice looking.
Does it just me, or does Chuck Dixon's writing remind you a little bit, maybe not style, but it's in theme? He has common themes with Joe Lansdale.
I don't know.
I just wonder.
Yeah, I don't think Mike Barron got canceled. I think he just aged out.
No, Mike Barron's still around. Matter of fact, he's.
But he doesn't. What it is a lot of these guys don't work for Marvel and DC anymore because all the editors they used to work with are gone.
Mike Barron,
and they want younger and cheaper.
I don't know if it's out yet, but he has done or is doing, it may already be published, a text novel of Nexus.
Right.
Yep.
I know Mike Barron has had some. Mike Barron and Chuck Dixon have both had some sort of minor kerfuffles on Twitter because they tend towards conservative. But I don't think that either has been
right. That if he got a bucket of chicken wings, he wouldn't touch any of the ones on the left half of the bucket.
Right. People have told me that to read Barron, not to read Barron. Yeah, I think that, but I have heard that, but I don't think he's been canceled. I think it's more like
he had been gone from comics for a while, even before Twitter. But he's doing those novels, and Steve Rude was doing a newspaper strip with Nexus.
They've had kind of a creative. They actually still get along, which I thought surprising. That's probably why they didn't. But they're just going in two different directions. Like Mike Barron has his idea of what Nexus should be, and Steve has his. But they're still getting along, and they're still doing live streams and stuff with each other. Which
right.
Usually, when you have that kind of a split, it's not friendly anymore, but evidently this one is. So.
I've heard Chuck Dixon say he's blackballed from the big two, but I don't think he actually is any more than anyone else his age is.
I've heard.
I think it's more
that. Yeah.
You have to understand in the world of freelance comic writing, especially, which is why you never hear freelancers say a bad word about anyone, because all it takes for you to not get any work anymore at DC or Marvel is to have your editor get fired, leave, or quit. Because you don't work for companies, you work for editors. Or have something you say get back to your editor and they think you've insulted them. Why are they going to hire you now? They're just going to hire some other writer to take your place. Right. And then I think Mike Barron and Chuck Dixon also, I think they aged out. All their editors are gone. Why, if you're a 26-year-old editor, why are you going to hire Chuck Dixon?
Mm-hmm.
That's really sad too.
I know, but it's terrible. And also, I think that
at least back in the day when there was an excuse for the New York-based pros to go to the bullpen.
Right.
It would be easier to get in touch with the new guys.
Right, that's what keeps you getting hired too. Showing up at the office, meeting the new editors, talking to them. If you can't do that anymore, because you've moved across the country, because you have your relationships established, you want to leave some, but then you don't get to meet the new editors. And that's how you get hired.
And then, it's also funny too when you have a new project come out, and especially Marvel DC, well, we're going to get the best, the best writers and the best artists, and you're looking at these artists, you've never heard of any of them because they're all 25 or less.
Right.
It's like, we mean the comics. You're not getting Barry Windsor Smith and Mike Kaluta,
website where trustworthy readers collectors can trade runs of different. Yeah.
It's not a bad idea. Actually, you could do that with the Facebook group or a Discord server, something like that.
Yeah.
That's not a bad idea if you want to trade stuff.
And then there's also what happens when Larry Hama described recently in a thread I saw, where he said, he couldn't get work for 10 years, not because he was blackballed, but because he said he was a has-been. He was like he even changed careers. He did all sorts of other stuff, and he's like But he's like, no one would hire me because I was a has-been. He's like, somehow I now transitioned to living legend and people are hiring me. That's because the people to who Larry Hama is a living legend are now doing the hiring.
Right.
So if you're 28 and working at some comic book company and you were a huge fan of Larry Hama's G.I. Joe, and you can hire Larry Hama, you do. You're like, woohoo, I can Harry Larry Hama.
Yeah.
But for the people in between who had no, the 28-year-olds who didn't like Larry Hama's
Well, I imagine that for the current run of X-Men Legends comics, I think it might be Tom Brevoort doing the making sure because why would the new guys want to give Fabian Nicieza and Wheezy and Brett Booth any work?
Right. Yeah, you do have to constantly network in order to keep, and you have to constantly not offend anyone.
Wheezy is one of the best kept secrets in comics.
Yeah.
She's really good.
She's been working a long time.
She needs to write her memoirs.
Yeah. I don't even know her. She's been a mainstream comics writer, so I don't even really know her work. Because she probably started writing comics right around when I stopped reading mainstream comics. So I couldn't, and I know she wrote Power Pack. I read some of that. It was solid.
I mean, she's edited a hell of a lot of different stuff too.
Yes. I know.
She stopped being X-Men editor, and that's when she began writing.
I didn't bookmark it, and I wish I had, but she's writing a webcomic, which is set in the middle of not in the middle, but the end of the Third Crusade, where Richard the Lionhearted is coming back from the Holy Land to Europe, and he gets captured in Germany. And his page Rondell is trying to find him, which is part of I think it's a long ballad song that was written about that. But she's doing a webcomic about that now, and it looked pretty interesting.
Yeah. It seems comic pros need to start planning for their next career as soon as they get popular. But the problem is if you actually get popular, you don't think it's going to end. You're probably like, I've made it. So you're 28, 29 years old, you're popular, you're like, I've made it. I got smooth sailing now. 10, 15 years later,
but you don't. Because,
you don't.
Yeah, because you're finally gonna have that comic whose number one sells 40,000 copies instead of 75.
Yeah.
But you still want the old salary.
And even though you see the guys in front of you, what's happening to them, you're like, well, that's not going to happen to me. I have it.
Have you studied history?
Yeah. Chuck Dixon drops an hour or less video on Wednesdays and answers questions people email him. Now he started doing one on what he watches because of his blog. Okay, I'm going to check that out. Tom King had an interview and talked about having to make strong personal relationships in order to get hired. Oh, yeah. They're seen as a rather negative but that's how people hire. That's how...
I mean, that's not only the comics industry, but that's most industries in general. There's
Here's the thing. No, in my business, we didn't need to be close friends to one another, and there are people that we like best than others. But we know each other. All of us know each other well enough that we can give somebody from the business a hand if they need to. So we don't need personal relationships. And I would imagine that the same should happen in comics. I mean, sure, I know the guy, but I don't need to invite them to my wedding.
Mm-hmm. I have also heard a lot of women writer and artists include a very old boy network way of hiring, and there probably is, but I always like to point out that almost all of publishing is an old girl network. No one ever mentions that. Publishing is like 78% women. Comics are the only part of publishing that's male dominated. And it's a very small part of publishing. So whenever I hear that complaint, I'm like, can't you give the guys one part of publishing? Do you have to have 78% of comics too, women working in it? Because no one ever points out whenever I hear people say, "Oh, comics is an old boy network." Try getting a job in publishing being an old boy. I can tell you, I lost all my freelance work when I was about 5 years ago, and it all went away. And for like 2-3 years, I couldn't get a look from any publisher. I sent out so many resumes. I didn't even get an interview from anybody I didn't know. Finally, the work I get was from people I know, networking. I could not, and I can tell you, Daisy, who's usually here with us, she works in publishing. And she would always let me or our friend Bunch, who were out of work, know when any job came up. And she, apply for this job. Apply for that. Jobs I'm perfectly qualified. Jobs I'm overqualified for in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And never even got an interview on one of them. Applied for 20, never even got this is knowing someone at the company. Never even got, and every one they hired was a 20-something-year-old woman. So that's how publishing works. It's usually, except for the very top of publishing, it's men. But the rest of so when I hear people complaining about comics being an old boy network, I'm like, okay, let the old boys have one part of publishing, okay? But everybody makes it out like it's a horrible crime that there are not enough women making comics. I'm like, there aren't enough men making. When you read about the rest of publishing, like when you read about comics, it's all about, we need to get more women reading comics. When you read about the rest of publishing, it's about, we have to get boys reading books. Because boys don't read books anymore. Because for whatever reason, and the reason might be that publishing is something like 70-something% female, boys don't read, and that's also why, like Chris Geruso, I know he does a lot of work going to libraries and selling his G-Man book and stuff there, because librarians love a book for boys that boys will read. because they can't get boys in the library. So that's that. We need more old boys in publishing, not less. But that people don't say that.
Well, in the automotive press, we're like 95% men. But when we finally moved in with the rest of the publishing group, because even though we were part of the we had our own office until 2004. We moved to I moved there in 2003. We moved and we had our own office until 2004, and we finally moved in with the publishing group. And yes, we were talking once to one of the editors from the Decoration magazine, and was, hey, we need more girls here. Really? Well, we need more guys.
Yeah, I found that people subconsciously hire people who somehow remind themselves in all fields. I don't even know how subconscious it is. I think sometimes it's conscious. But
yeah. Oh, you want to know how I got hired for Autosport? I got so wasted at a car media presentation. The guy who became Autosport editor was blamed for getting me drunk because I was still a new guy. And a year and a half later, I was working for him.
I've gotten almost all my work through networking. The reason I'm teaching right now is because my friend Ed, who also recommended me back at Marvel. That's how I got my job at Marvel. So they needed someone to teach digital pre-press, which is what I do. And he said, Jared can do the job. So called me for, it was one of those interviews where I knew I had the job before I even interviewed, kind of thing.
Right.
Because she could just tell that the recommendation was good enough. Because she looked at my resume and went, wow, you did all this stuff, which was all this, all the stuff I had to teach. I'm like, yeah. She's like, can you be a teacher? I'm like, I think I can, because I taught everybody who worked at Marvel. That was part of my job, was to train everybody new who came in. So I would teach them all, and individual one-on-one rather than a class. But that's how I got.
As the ubiquitous phrase and it goes now, it'd be called onboarding.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, I remember when we did interviews, it was practically a done deal that person was going to get hired. Because even me, who had no hiring power, I got my share of spontaneous applications.
Yeah.
And okay, what am I supposed to do with this? It's not like we're hiring.
Yeah, creator. It is really tough to be a creator of anything, because it's like playing the lottery. And,
you almost have to be a pre-established creator that had a big name before the current state of the industry now.
Right. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I want to start up my Patreon soon. But the main thing that's stopping me from doing it is the pointlessness of it. Kind of like, if you don't have a fan base, what's the point of a Patreon? It's like, I'm going to have to do so much work just to get noticed, which I've never been able to do before in terms of it's tough to get noticed as any kind of creator. So
not really. Just say something really stupid and you'll become famous.
There are a lot of people saying a lot of stupid things. Very few.
That is very true. That is very true.
No, you just have to say
higher than it used to be.
You just have to say the correct stupid thing at the right time.
Yeah, that's not easy. So it's like I'm kind of you've heard people talk about the fear of failure before.
Yeah.
How people don't do stuff because they're afraid they'll fail at it.
Right.
I don't have the fear of failure. I have the fear of pointlessness.
I have the fear of economic failure.
Well, there is that.
Yeah.
Because I've been running a web comic for 10 years now, and it's pointless because very few people ever read it. It doesn't actually get me anything. I just like doing it. And some days I'm like, why am I doing this? It's pointless. I write a blog every week on my or some art. I've been doing that for 15 years. no one ever reads it. No one ever talks to me about it. I don't know that anyone has read. I stopped looking at my Google statistics like a decade ago, because if I look at my Google statistics for any given blog I write, 25 people may read it. That's a lot. So it's like, I don't even want to know how few people are reading it. So it's like, I have this. So I'm like, here I am starting this Patreon. Is it another completely pointless endeavor I'm spending my energy on? And it's like the fear of pointlessness has stopped me from starting it up. I don't know that that's the same thing as the fear of failure, but that's the fear I have, the fear of pointlessness. I've heard the women dominated, but I wonder if it's because of romance. I don't know why. I have no idea historically why, but Harlequin romance novels, that one publisher, is bigger than the entire comics industry. And you never hear people say, we should make romance novels for men. You never say Harlequin should hire more men. You never see it. It's just weird that comics sort of punch above their own weight in this visibility thing.
But if you go into used bookstore, what do you see the majority of it is these days?
I don't know. I haven't been to a music
Harlequin romance novels.
Yeah.
And a lot of Tom Clancy novels.
Yeah. I drifted out of freelance newspaper because I didn't know how to network anymore when face-to-face meetings faded into email. Yet networking, the guys who I've seen networking in comics were Jimmy Palmiotti was the best networker I've ever seen. Just the best.
He knows a lot of people, man.
Yeah, he was just the best now. Even when he was Mark Teixeira's assistant in the early 90s and he was really young, he was good at networking. And another Dan Slott. I don't know if he's good at networking, but he was the most persistent networker I've ever seen.
Bill Sienkiewicz knows everybody too.
Yeah, but that's because he's a big name talent.
That's true.
People come to Bill Sienkiewicz. Bill Sienkiewicz doesn't have to network as much. People will. He's that big a name, right, where people will go to him. There's a few and he's a unique talent.
Yeah, there's a guy that does a podcast, and I can't remember his name, that kind of networks a lot like that, like you'd think, in the same vein as Jimmy Palmiotti. I can't remember the guy's name. I was
always terrible at networking, which explains, a lot of. I haven't had a ton of success. I've done tons and tons of work on my own. Creatively, I've had nothing.
Tom Spurgeon had a giant network.
Yeah, Dan Slott was just one of these handful of writers who hung around Marvel all through the 90s and would get a job here, a job here, a job here, a job here, but not really be able to parlay it into anything.
Right.
So the fact that so many years later he was able to parlay it into being one of the top writers really impressed me. I mean, it took him a long time to become the hated Dan Slott.
The hated Dan
Slott. Even though I like him, he's a nice guy, but a lot of people on Twitter didn't like him. Most creators in any form have trouble making a life. Yeah, art in any form. It is tough to be a creative. It really is. Agreed. Listening to Jared say, think of how many artists only ever get their work noticed many years. What really kills me, women dominate book publishing because they know everything. Just ask one. Well, Ditko is a big name. Jared, where's your webcomic available? Don't see it. You can go to jaredosborne.com and click on the link, or it's on, of course, Jared isn't spelled that way. It's spelled as it is. Or you can go to, it's not Radiant Comics. jaredosborne.com has all my links. Radiant Comics is my blog and webcomic.
Well, I just finished getting those images assembled for a Read Rip Slab.
Want to save it for next week or do it right now?
No, we can do it now.
We can do it now.
Okay. Save us share your screen. There we go. I see. Do I have to hit share or?
Yeah.
Let's see. Edit name. Banned from studio. Oh, add to stream. That's what I want to do. Ooh, Strange Tales.
Yeah.
Tales to
The-
Astonish.
The theme is Marvel Monster Comics, which came out in the same week as Fantastic Four #1.
Ah, and they're all orange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of orange and black there.
And
Yeah, I
they're
thought
all
about
sort
doing.
of- they're
Right.
all orange and rocky, like the Thing.
Yeah, I thought about doing one with one monster comic, one teen romance comic, and one western. But we do have certain tendencies, so I decided to make this difficult by doing all monster comics.
Right.
I think all three of those look pretty neat.
Yeah.
The one in the middle looks like Igu from the Herculoids.
Wow. Okay. I
I'd
am
have
going
to roll a die
to.
to figure out which one. I mean, any of those three would be interesting. Yeah.
Which cover do I like best?
I like the monster
think
on the left the best, just because of the eyes.
I'm trying to decide between the left and in the middle. I think I'm gonna slab Tales to Astonish because I like that cover and I'll hang it up on the wall in a slab. I'm going to read Strange Tales and have to tear up Tales of Suspense. Ooh, that's brutal.
I think I agree with Jared. Yeah.
Brutal. Have to tear up Tales of Suspense.
I'd read all three of those. I mean,
That's not the game.
I know it's not, but in this case, I'd roll a die to see which one came in.
No rolling a die. Got to pick.
Yeah, I'm going
Which
to
one do you tear
slab
up?
Strange Tales, read Tales to Astonish, and rip Tales of Suspense. I mean
think we all agree
Orgo
with
is definitely the most dynamic cover. That's why I would slap that.
Oh, I was trying to decide. See, the Orgo, it's a good cover, but I think the Krogar, the Tales to Astonish, is a little more sophisticated a cover as I looked at it.
I want to see what Krogar is like. The monster is taking that guy to Krogar.
It's like a grocery store.
Yeah, and and Tales of Suspense. I mean, creature from the Black Bog, the one with the least interesting name. Even though we have a pretty dynamic cover because you can see the movement not only of the monster but of the people in the boat.
Right. I think I am tearing up Tales of Suspense because it's the cover that least impresses me.
Mm-hmm.
Even maybe if I had them all here in my hand, it would be different because I could see the subtleties of Tales. But as of these thumbnails, I'm going to have to tear up Tales of Suspense because I have to tear up one of them. That's the game.
Mm-hmm.
That's the game. All right, that was a good one. I liked that one.
Yeah, it's much harder to do it when all the comics actually look interesting.
Yeah,
much harder.
Sometimes I find it's harder to do when there's a theme to the comic. When like I said, I try to get them all three of them equally interesting. Sometimes all three of them equally disinteresting.
Yeah,
he likes the background on Tales to Astonish over the late one on Strange Tales. Okay.
And I wanted to show those because they came out in the same week as Fantastic Four #1. Because people have to start losing this notion that Marvel did not exist before Fantastic Four #1.
And they put out that omnibus last year. Mm-hmm. Did you see that one with all the comics in it that came out the week of Fantastic Four #1? Now they're putting out one that came out all the same some month as maybe Amazing Fantasy 15.
Gotcha.
So it's got, but I remember we were discussing that omnibus, and I was like, "Who's that aimed at?" Because that's a tough. I would rather have them as physical comics. I would rather have like
floppies.
Instead of an omnibus, have all the actual
floppies,
facsimile editions of the comics,
right,
as they came out that week. I think that would be more fun for me.
How can you go wrong with a monster that looks like Jack Kirby and Mike Mignola with big bug eyes that's named Orgo? How can you go wrong with that?
Yeah.
Right.
Did you even notice, Paolo, that they were all looked like they were all orange and rocky? That was
Yeah,
weird.
the fact that they were all orange. Yeah, the rocky. Well, it depends on the texture because in Krogar, you can tell Krogar is that is organic.
Well, okay. His rocks on
And well, the creature from the Black Bog needs to be somewhat amphibious, but I'll chuck it up to the lighting effects.
Nah. All right. Well, we're reaching our end time, so Paolo can go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if anybody ever gives you a jungle comic from the '60s, you go with the orange monster comic instead.
One last random. Oh, this was just a random part of that Conan issue that had a snake crawling out from a skull's eye.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, one of those things you'd look at and glance over as you kept going in the comic, and now it's not. Now that I put it on its own card,
There's
like, wow.
more than one album cover that has a skull with a snake through the eye.
Yeah,
several.
It's not the first time it's been drawn. That's for sure.
It's true.
All right, so everybody have a good night out there. We will catch you guys next week.
To answer Lefty Blue's question there, once I have money again, I'm going to start working. That book pisses me off because it's 7 years late. 7 years.
Finally supposed to be coming out. Saw it in Comic Shop Weekly.
They've got my hopes up one too many times over the years.
You'll believe it when you see it.
Exactly.
Next Saturday, I'm probably going to buy comics again for the first time in almost 2 years.
Wow.
We have the Amadora Comics Festival, and we have the Wonder Woman 80th anniversary exhibit.
Oh, cool.
And Mind the Comics is supposedly leaving his cave and coming over.
All right. A meetup.
So, yeah, a meetup. So I'll try to post some videos.
Do you know if that exhibit has a catalog to go with it?
It does.
Okay. I'm just curious.
He'll show it to us.
I don't know if it's done. Usually, when it was 3 weekends, the catalog was done on the Sunday of the second weekend instead of on the first. But I hope I hope it's done by the first weekend because I can't go to the second. I'm working Saturday and Sunday on the second weekend, and this time there's no third weekend.
All right, good for you, Paolo. All right. Well, we'll catch everyone next week, and have a good week out there. Ta-ta.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
End broad.